The first time I met Brianna was at a coffee shop just off campus. I was a sophomore working part-time as a barista, juggling my studies with the demands of earning enough to stay afloat. She walked in with an air of confidence, her laughter filling the small space as she joked with a friend. I couldn't help but notice her vibrant energy. When she ordered a chai latte, I accidentally gave her a cappuccino instead, leading to an awkward exchange that ended with her smiling and saying, "I'll give you a pass, this time." That chance encounter turned into more. We kept bumping into each other at campus events, and I finally mustered the courage to ask her out. Our first date was nothing glamorous, just burgers at a local diner and a late-night walk by the lake. But it was perfect. Brianna was studying criminal justice, her dream to work in law driving her determination. I was captivated by her ambition and her ability to make me laugh until my sides hurt. By the time we graduated, we had become inseparable. I secured an entry-level role at a publishing house, and Brianna found a position at a law firm. We worked long hours and lived in a tiny apartment with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper, but we were happy. It was during those years that we built the foundation of our life together. Long talks about our dreams, late-night dinners of cheap takeout, and laughter that echoed through those shabby walls. When our first child was born, life shifted in ways we couldn't have imagined. I remember holding her hand as she gave birth, marveling at her strength and the new chapter unfolding before us. Brianna temporarily stepped back from her career, pouring herself into motherhood while I climbed the corporate ladder. Despite the sleepless nights and endless diapers, we were a team, balancing the chaos with love and unwavering support for one another. As our family grew, so did the demands on our time and energy. We moved into a modest house, gradually transforming it into a home filled with memories. Brianna returned to work once our youngest started kindergarten, excelling as a paralegal. Watching her thrive professionally while managing our family with grace only deepened my admiration for her. Our days were hectic, but we always made time for each other, weekly date nights and summer vacations where we'd reconnect away from the noise of everyday life. Looking back now, I realize those early years were filled with milestones that shaped us. Every triumph, every challenge, and every compromise brought us closer. We'd weathered storms before, financial stress, career shifts, and raising children, but nothing had prepared me for the crossroads we were about to face. The signs had been there, subtle yet persistent, but I was too blind to acknowledge them. For several weeks, the clues had been right before me, yet I failed to see them. My wife, Brianna, had begun lavishing me with an unusual amount of care and attention. Instead of the usual quick toast and coffee in the mornings, she started preparing elaborate breakfasts. Evening meals became a celebration of my favorite dishes, often accompanied by wine. She'd then appear in new lingerie, shower me with affection, and entice me to bed earlier than usual. Did I question this transformation in our 24 years together? Not at all. I welcomed the change as a refreshing turn in our routine. After our youngest child left for college a few months ago, I resolved to show Brianna how much I appreciated her. I made it a point to be home by 5 every evening. We began enjoying upscale dinners, attending local theater shows, and even tried dancing, a hobby we hadn't explored in years. I brought her flowers regularly and eagerly embraced this new phase of our empty nest lifestyle. My name is Tyler Winslow, though everyone calls me Ty. My wife, Brianna, Bree for short, and I had been married for almost 25 years. Like any relationship, we had our ups and downs, but the good times far outweighed the challenges. I was content with our life. I work as a senior director at a major publishing house, having climbed the ladder over 2 decades. My expertise spans every aspect of publishing, reviewing manuscripts, working with authors, coordinating with designers, negotiating contracts, managing budgets, and overseeing marketing and film rights. Introducing new authors and their books to the world has always been a point of pride for me. Brianna, nearly 45 years old and stunningly beautiful, has a career of her own. Thanks to good genes, a healthy lifestyle, and proper nutrition, we've both aged gracefully. People often compliment us as a striking couple. Since our youngest started kindergarten, Bree has been working as a paralegal at the prestigious law firm Thomas, Dixon & Harris. Over time, she was promoted to manage the paralegal team, overseeing assignments and workflow for the entire department. Everything changed last Wednesday. I came home as usual around 5 p.m. and found Bree in the kitchen, preparing dinner. For weeks now, her meals had been more elaborate and thoughtful than ever before. I kissed the back of her head as I walked in. Typically, Bree would turn to kiss me properly, but this time she didn't. No grand welcome kiss for me today? I teased. She responded without looking up. I'm just glad you're home. Her tone felt distant, as if she was avoiding even a brief moment of connection. Is something wrong? I asked. Nothing at all, she replied quickly. Go change, and I'll have a glass of your favorite wine ready when you come back down. Though her response felt dismissive, I brushed off my unease and went upstairs. After hanging up my suit and tossing my shirt in the laundry basket, I changed into more comfortable clothes, a pair of Dockers and a sweatshirt. Dinner that night wasn't extravagant, but it was clear she'd put thought into it. We started with a simple salad of lettuce and tomatoes, followed by a main course of roasted pork served over cauliflower rice. As we toasted with glasses of wine, Bree looked at me and said, You know I love you, right? There was something different in her voice. This wasn't the usual casual I love you we exchanged daily. I nodded, replying, And I love you too. After dinner, we cleared the table as usual. I loaded the dishwasher while Bree stored the leftovers. She excused herself to go upstairs and change into something more comfortable. Anticipating another romantic evening, I eagerly followed her lead. When I entered the dimly lit living room, I saw Bree reclining on the sofa in a revealing negligee that barely covered her. Her beauty took my breath away. Without hesitation, I knelt by the sofa and kissed her deeply. The moment was electric. My kisses trailed from her lips to her bare shoulders, and soon her negligee slipped off, exposing her chest. Her figure was stunning, and I couldn't help but admire her, as if for the first time. You love me, don't you, Ty? She whispered. You'll always love me no matter what? Of course, I assured her without hesitation. I quickly undressed and joined her on the sofa, where our passion ignited once more. Half an hour later, we lay entwined, savoring the afterglow. That night, she seemed more fervent than ever. It feels so good to rediscover the spark we've missed over the years, I said, kissing her gently. Our conversation drifted to compliments about how well we both maintained ourselves over the years. I teased that she could easily pass for someone in her early 30s, while she playfully ran her hand over my abs, praising my fitness. Just as I was drifting off, Bree's voice pulled me back. Honey, there's something I need to tell you, she said softly. Anything, I murmured, still half asleep. You know how much I love you, right? Her voice was barely audible. Yes, and I love you just as much, I replied. She hesitated before continuing. Darling, she began carefully. This Friday, I've made plans to meet someone from my office for the night. Her words hung in the air for a moment before they truly registered. When they did, I stood up abruptly and locked eyes with her. What is this? I asked, my voice firm. She tried to pull me back down, urging my head to rest on her chest again, but I resisted. No, seriously, what are you talking about? I pressed. It doesn't change anything about how we feel for each other, she said softly. I'll still love you, and you'll still love me. I blinked, taken aback. You can't be serious. Is this some kind of joke? She shook her head. No, Ty, I'm not joking. I have a date this Saturday with a man from my office. We're going out for dinner and dancing. After that, we'll go to his hotel room and I'll spend the night with him. I'll be back home late Sunday morning. I stared at her, stunned. So what you're really saying is that you're planning to spend Saturday night and Sunday morning sleeping with some guy. Don't put it like that, she said, frowning. That's crude and unnecessary. He's a good man and I like him. The shock jolted me fully awake. I began pulling on my clothes, signaling that our moment of closeness was over. It was clear to her that I was furious. Ty, please don't react this way, she pleaded. I still love you and you still love me. It's just this one time, and then it'll be over. In a week, everything will go back to the way it was and you'll forget about it. Forget about it? I snapped, disbelief dripping from my words. Who is this guy, Bree? Why are you trying to ruin everything we've built now when things are so good? She tightened the sash of her satin robe and replied, His name doesn't matter. It's not something you need to know, and I don't want you doing anything reckless. Besides, he's bigger than you, and he could hurt you if it came to that. Oh, trust me, I shot back. With my rage and a baseball bat, he wouldn't stand a chance. She sighed. It's just one night, Ty. He's leaving for New York on Sunday evening for good. He won't be back. He better leave, I growled, because if he doesn't, the next time he walks into court, it'll be on crutches. As my initial rage simmered, a deep sense of loss began to set in. Bree and I had been together for over 2 decades. She was my first and only lover. Temptations had come and gone, but I'd never acted on them. Now, this? How long has this been going on? I demanded. It's not a thing, she said, avoiding my gaze. We've barely touched. What does that even mean? Holding hands? Hugging? Kissing? Or more? I pressed, needing clarity. She stayed silent, which only confirmed my worst fears. If it had been something less passionate, she would have admitted it outright. Finally, she explained, he came to our firm about 6 months ago from a top New York law office to assist with a complex tax case. I worked closely with him, research, charts, graphs for court. Over time, we became close. 2 months ago, he told me he had feelings for me and wanted to sleep with me. But I didn't want to sneak off to some cheap motel or do something inappropriate at work. This was different. It needed to be special. He suggested I find a way to take a night away. I told him I couldn't lie to you. He asked if you might allow it just once. I wasn't sure, but I hoped you'd understand that this would only be a one-time thing and wouldn't change anything between us. Why? I demanded. Why would you risk everything we have? We're happy. We love each other. We have an incredible marriage, amazing kids, no financial worries, and our health. Why would you jeopardize that? She hesitated. Because my friend made me realize I've only ever been with you. He showed me what I might be missing. I just want to know what it's like. This will be enough. It'll make me feel whole. He cares about me, and I care about him. It's not some tawdry affair. But Bree, I protested, we have something rare and beautiful. You're the only woman I've ever been with, and I thought I was the only man you'd ever been with. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I need this. I want this. I want him. Why? I asked, desperate for a reason. She sighed deeply. He's so attractive, Ty. He's younger than me, but still finds me irresistible. I'm drawn to him in a way I can't explain. I just need to experience this, or I'll regret it forever. He feels the same way. Please, let me do this. Afterward, I'll be yours completely. I'll never agree to this, I replied firmly. It'll destroy us, Bree. It'll ruin our marriage. No, it won't, she insisted. Once it's over, I'll be the best wife you can imagine. I'll cook for you, keep the house immaculate, do the laundry, the shopping, everything. I'll be the perfect partner in every way, including the bedroom. You can have me anytime, however you want. I'll treat you like a king for the rest of our lives. I promise I'll never touch another man again. And I'll have to live with the fact that my wife slept with another man, I said bitterly. Do you know how humiliating that is for a man? It's the ultimate betrayal. You'll have to accept it, she said firmly. I'm going to do this, Ty. I need to. It won't change anything between us. You'll still love me, and I'll still love you. So that's what all the affection and attention over the last 2 months was about, I said coldly. It wasn't about us becoming empty nesters. You were trying to soften me up so I wouldn't push back on this insane idea. Well, guess what, Bree? That's not going to happen. Bree stood firm, unmoved by any of my arguments or objections. Her mind was made up and she wasn't going to reconsider. I didn't resort to pleading. She would have to deal with the fallout of her choices, whatever that might mean. I didn't yet know what consequences lay ahead. I went to our bedroom, packed a few items I'd need for the next day, grabbed my toiletries, and relocated to the guest room, which had its own attached bathroom in our spacious home. As I was moving my belongings, Bree tried to stop me. Don't do this, Ty, she said. Nothing's going to change. I know you're upset now, but by Sunday afternoon, this will all be behind us. We'll go back to being us. I paused, meeting her gaze. I'm not just upset, Bree, I replied, keeping my tone calm but resolute. If you go through with this, we'll never be us again. I closed the guest room door without waiting for her response. Inside, I was left alone with my thoughts, which swirled chaotically. I considered all the possible responses: divorce, moving out, demanding that Bree leave, physically stopping her from going, even telling her parents or our kids. But none of these options felt right. I couldn't bring myself to divorce her. I still loved her, despite her lapse in judgment. I wasn't about to leave my own home either, and evicting her, while tempting, felt extreme. I also doubted that involving her family or ours would solve anything. If Bree chose to call off her plans, it needed to be her decision, not one coerced by outside pressure. Otherwise, it might just push her into being more secretive in the future. It was Thursday evening, and it was clear that Bree had waited until the last minute to tell me. This tactic limited the time I had to process, respond, or try to prevent her from following through. I was terrified. She admitted to having feelings for this man, and I couldn't help but wonder, was she considering leaving me now that the kids were out of the house? The thought shattered me. What if she found their night together more satisfying than our closeness? What if this opened the door to more? For 25 years, Bree and I had shared a comfortable, familiar closeness. There weren't many surprises left in our physical relationship, but I still found her incredibly attractive. Whether she wore a sleek black dress, a hot negligee, or just a towel, her body had never stopped exciting me. But now, as much as I feared the future, I started to consider ways to stop her. Could I somehow prevent her from going through with this? If her Prince Charming left town before they met, I'd have time to remind her of what she was risking. And maybe, just maybe, I could make sure she never entertained an idea like this again. Before I finally fell asleep late that night, I devised a plan. Talking Bree out of her decision seemed impossible, but perhaps her employer could intervene. I knew that Thomas, Dixon, and Harris, the law firm where Bree worked, had strict rules against workplace relationships. If I spoke to one of the senior partners about her situation, they might confront her about how her actions could affect her career. The next morning, I woke up first. Normally, I'd brew coffee for Bree before leaving for work, but not today. When she greeted me with a hesitant, "Good morning," I didn't reply in kind. All I said was, "Don't do this," before leaving the house without our usual goodbye kiss. I knew she noticed the shift in my behavior. Later that morning, I drove downtown to the offices of Thomas, Dixon, and Harris. Their firm occupied the top floor of a modern skyscraper. The reception area was as sleek and impressive as I remembered from past events, an open layout with plush seating, a fully stocked bar, and walls adorned with tasteful artwork. Seated at the central reception desk was Emily Stratton, the firm's office manager. Emily and I had crossed paths many times over the years at local events, and while we weren't close, we were friendly acquaintances. Despite being in her mid-50s, Emily carried herself with grace and poise. Her conservative attire never drew attention to her figure, but she had an understated elegance that didn't go unnoticed. With her golden hair always pulled into a bun and glasses perched on her nose, she exuded professionalism. Emily's face lit up when she saw me walk in. "Tyler, what a nice surprise," she said warmly, stepping out from behind her desk to greet me. She gave me a quick hug, her cheerful demeanor temporarily lifting my gloom. "Emily," I said with a faint smile, "I need to speak with Mr. Thomas. It's personal and important." Her expression grew serious. "This is about Brianna, isn't it?" she asked perceptively. I hesitated before answering vaguely. "Maybe." Emily nodded knowingly and adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Thomas is just finishing up a meeting," she said, checking his schedule. "He has about half an hour before he heads out for lunch with clients. I'll make sure he has a moment to talk with you." I thanked her and took a seat in the waiting area. A few minutes later, Emily brought me a cup of coffee. "I added a splash of Bailey's," she said with a wink. "You look like you need it." Her gesture of kindness brought a faint smile to my face, but my mind was still focused on the difficult conversation ahead. I only hoped that William Thomas could help me stop Bree before it was too late. Moments later, the intercom on Emily's desk buzzed. "I'm back in my office, Emily," came Mr. Thomas's voice. Emily seized the opportunity. "Mr. Thomas, Tyler Winslow is here. He's hoping to speak with you for a few minutes. It's important." There was a brief pause. Mr. Thomas replied thoughtfully. "If you think it's worth my time, send him in. I can spare about 5 minutes before my next appointment." Emily guided me through a pair of glass doors, down a short hallway, and to a large, intricately carved wooden door. She opened it, gesturing for me to step inside, and then closed it quietly behind me. The office was impressive, spacious and meticulously arranged. Mr. Thomas stood near his expansive desk, which was flanked by several chairs. On the opposite side of the room, a comfortable sitting area featured a sofa, an armchair, and a coffee table. The walls were adorned with framed degrees, awards, and plaques, underscoring his success. He stepped around the desk, extending his hand warmly. "Tyler, good to see you. How's life? Still in publishing?" "I'm doing okay," I replied, though my tone lacked enthusiasm. "Well, if Emily thinks it's important, it must be. What's on your mind?" As I stood there, I hesitated. The weight of the conversation suddenly felt overwhelming. Still, I forced myself to begin. "I hate to bring this to you, Mr. Thomas. Honestly, it's embarrassing." "What's going on, Ty?" he asked, his tone both curious and sincere. I took a deep breath. "My wife, Brianna, works here. She's told me she plans to spend Saturday night with one of your associates. I've tried everything to dissuade her, but she's adamant. Mr. Thomas, ever the sharp lawyer, grasped the situation immediately. So, you're hoping I can step in? Maybe have a word with Brianna or this associate? That was my intention when I came here, I admitted. But now I think I've made a mistake. This is my problem, and I need to handle it myself. He nodded slowly, considering my words. You're aware, of course, that our firm has policies about workplace relationships, especially within the same department. Those policies exist to protect us from potential issues like conflicts of interest or legal liability. Yes, I'm aware, I said quietly. Placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder, he continued. Our fraternization policy isn't as robust as it should be. I've been meaning to tighten it, add clear consequences for violations. Unfortunately, I can't rewrite policy overnight, and certainly not before Saturday. I nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. Thank you for your time, Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry to have bothered you with this. I need to figure out how to deal with it on my own. Good luck, Ty, he said as I turned to leave. I stepped back into the reception area, where Emily was waiting with a curious look. How did it go? She asked. It was a mistake to bring this to him, I admitted. I feel foolish. Emily gave me a kind smile. You're being too hard on yourself. Sit down and take a moment. I'll bring you another coffee or something stronger if you'd prefer. I sank into one of the plush chairs in the waiting area, running my hands over my face as my thoughts raced. I felt defeated, completely out of options. Bree seemed determined to go through with her plans, and I didn't know how to stop her. Overwhelmed, I leaned forward, my head in my hands. Emily's cheerful voice broke through my despair. Come on, Ty, let's go to lunch. My treat. I hesitated, but the idea of stepping away and clearing my head was appealing. I agreed, and Emily arranged for a colleague to cover for her while she took an extended break. As we walked to a nearby restaurant she liked, she linked her arm with mine in a gesture of support. Over iced tea, Emily gently encouraged me to open up. I hesitated, but eventually I told her everything. She listened quietly, nodding at the right moments. After we ordered, she chose soup and half a sandwich while I picked at a Caesar salad. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics. When we finished eating, Emily ordered coffee for both of us, and we sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Emily broke the silence with something unexpected. Did you know my late husband was a fighter pilot? I knew you were widowed, I replied, but I didn't know he was a pilot. Her expression softened. Joe was my hero. We married right after he graduated from the Air Force Academy. He flew A-10S, the Warthog, as they call it. He served 2 tours in the Middle East before he was tragically eliminated in a training accident. I listened as she recounted his service, including the honors he received. The Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and 2 Bronze Stars. Her voice wavered slightly as she spoke, but there was pride in her words. Joe used to tell me about air combat strategies, she continued. One scenario stuck with me. When facing a single enemy fighter, a 2-plane formation would split up. The enemy had to pick a target, pursue one, and leave the other free to attack, or try to target both and fail. Either way, the enemy lost. Emily's story intrigued me, though I wasn't sure what she was driving at. Are you talking about Bree's date? I asked. She smiled, her eyes sharp with meaning. Give her a choice, Ty. No matter what she chooses, make sure you win. Her words hung in the air as she reached across the table, gently taking my hand. Her smile was disarming, filled with quiet encouragement, and for the first time that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. After lunch with Emily, I went back to the office, immersing myself in work to avoid going home to Bree. The thought of spending an evening in her company, pretending everything was normal, felt unbearable. Later, I stopped by the Iris Club, a cozy spot where I could enjoy a few drinks with friends and momentarily distract myself. It was almost 10 p.m. when I finally returned home, and Bree was waiting for me, her frustration evident. You didn't even bother to call, she said, her tone sharp. I went out of my way to make a nice dinner for us. It's sitting in the fridge. I was hoping we could spend some time together tonight, maybe even reconnect. And now I can smell the booze on you. Yes, I had a few drinks, I replied bluntly. I stayed out because I didn't want to face this situation tonight. I needed to forget, just for a little while, about what you're planning tomorrow. I headed toward the guest room without waiting for her response. I'm tired and going to bed. Her voice followed me down the hallway. Don't worry, Ty. Tomorrow will come and go, and this will all be behind us. We'll go back to how things were before. I didn't reply. I simply shut the door, stripped to my boxers, and collapsed onto the guest bed, exhaustion and frustration weighing heavily on me. The next morning, I was up early. I downed a quick breakfast, just coffee and toast, and headed outside to work on the yard. Mowing the lawn, pulling weeds, and tidying up the space gave me something to focus on. When I came back inside, sweaty and tired, Bree was getting ready to head out. "I've got a spa appointment," she announced nonchalantly. "Manicure, pedicure, the whole thing. I'll be back in a few hours." I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her. "Bree, don't do this," I said quietly but firmly. "It won't end the way you think it will." She paused briefly but didn't respond, disappearing through the door and leaving me alone once again. When she returned later that afternoon, it was clear she'd gone all out. Her hair was pinned up in an elegant style, her nails painted a bold, vibrant red. She looked radiant, too radiant. I could tell she was preparing for something special. Meanwhile, I'd been busy as well. The living room had been transformed, the furniture rearranged, and the rug rolled up to reveal an open space. Bree stopped in her tracks, taking in the room. "What's going on, Ty? Why is the rug rolled up, and why is the coffee table pushed to the side?" "I made room for dancing," I said casually. "I thought we could have a romantic evening together." She crossed her arms, skepticism etched across her face. "What are you trying to pull?" "Nothing underhanded," I replied. "I just want to show you that staying home tonight would be the better choice. Let me show you something." I gestured toward the dining room. Reluctantly, she followed me. I'd set the table with meticulous care, using our best china, crystal glasses, and silver flatware. A bouquet of roses sat in the center, flanked by 2 tall candles, their warm glow creating an passionate atmosphere. It was the kind of table you'd find in a high-end restaurant. "Ty," she said slowly, her voice firm, "I see what you're doing, but it's not going to work. You know I already have plans tonight." "I know what your plans are," I said evenly. "But plans can change. Sometimes something better comes along. Are you really going to disappoint me for him?" "Ty, don't do this to yourself," she said, shaking her head. Ignoring her words, I led her to the kitchen where the evening's menu was already underway. "Let me walk you through what I've prepared," I began. "We'll start with a chilled green gazpacho, garnished with chopped yellow tomatoes and cucumber. Then, a crisp salad of iceberg lettuce with avocado and bacon, drizzled with ranch dressing. To cleanse the palate, I've made a lime sorbet." "Ty, stop," she said softly. "You're putting so much effort into this, and it's not going to change my mind," I continued, undeterred. "The main course is a pork chop stuffed with rice and herbs, finished with a béarnaise sauce. On the side, asparagus sautéed with garlic butter and creamy potato gratin. For dessert, a scoop of vanilla ice cream with green crème de menthe. We'll finish with coffee and your choice of liqueur." Bree sighed, exasperation mingled with guilt. "It sounds amazing, but I'm leaving tonight. I even bought a new dress for the occasion." She turned and headed upstairs. I heard the shower running as I went to our bedroom to change. I put on a pair of black pants, a fitted black shirt, and leather dance shoes. A formal suit seemed unnecessary for a dinner at home. When Bree came downstairs, my heart sank. She was stunning. Her black dress hugged her figure perfectly, with a neckline that drew attention to her décolletage. The hemline stopped modestly above her knees, but the slit along the side climbed daringly high, revealing a glimpse of her stocking tops as she moved. Her heels, adorned with delicate diamond-studded straps, added the finishing touch. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning slightly to show off the ensemble. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but I kept my tone calm. "You look incredible," I said, forcing a tight smile. "Like you're dressed to impress someone, but not me." "It's a special night, Ty. I wanted to look my best. Don't worry. I'll wear this for you another time," she said dismissively, walking past me toward the door. As I flipped through the radio stations, George Michael's Careless Whisper came on, a song that always pulled at my emotions. I turned up the volume, letting the familiar melody wash over me. "Can I have one last dance before you go?" I asked softly. Bree hesitated for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. "All right, just one." I walked over, gently took her hand, and pulled her into a slow embrace. We swayed to the rhythm, her body close against mine. The scent of her perfume was achingly familiar, stirring memories of better times. "You're wearing English leather," she murmured, a faint smile on her lips. "I know it's your favorite," I replied. As the song reached its final verses, I trailed soft kisses along her cheek and down her neck. She sighed, her response almost instinctive, a gentle sound of contentment. Encouraged, I slid my hand to the strap of her dress, easing it off her shoulder while kissing her neck. She froze, pulling back abruptly. "No, Ty, don't. You know I'm leaving tonight. We can do this another time." I held her gaze for a moment, my voice low and steady. "It's not too late to change your mind." Her expression hardened. "I'm not changing my plans, Ty. I told you I'm going on this date, and I don't want you to ruin it." Exhaling slowly, I stepped back. "All right, Bree, I won't interfere anymore. You've made your choice, and I see it's final. But before you walk out that door, there are 2 things I want you to do." Suspicion flickered across her face. "What are they?" "First," I said, gesturing toward the dining room, "I want you to see what I've done. Look at the table I set for us tonight. I want you to remember it as you walk out." I lit the candles and dimmed the lights, bathing the room in a soft golden glow. The scene was passionate and romantic, a picture of what could have been. Bree glanced at the setup and shrugged. "We can have a romantic dinner another time, Ty." I stepped closer, took her left hand, and carefully slid off her wedding and engagement rings. "Second, I don't want you touching him while wearing the rings I gave you. These are symbols of us, and you're choosing to leave them behind tonight." Her eyes widened slightly as I placed the rings, along with my own wedding band, on the small hallway table. For a moment, she looked uncomfortable, even guilty. "Okay," she said quietly. As Bree reached for her shawl and clutch, the doorbell rang. Both of us turned toward the sound, surprised. Through the frosted glass, a figure stood silhouetted. "Who could that be at this hour?" she muttered, moving to open the door. When she did, her voice caught in a mix of surprise and confusion. "Emily? What are you doing here?" I stepped forward, taking Emily's hand and guiding her inside. Bree's eyes darted to Emily's outfit, a striking cocktail dress far removed from her usual conservative work attire. The scarlet dress clung to Emily's curves, with off-the-shoulder straps tied in delicate bows. Her legs were accentuated by French-style red stockings, and her updo was decorated with a ribbon matching her dress. "Ty invited me," Emily said smoothly, her gaze drifting to the candlelit dining table. "He promised me an evening of romance, dinner by candlelight, slow dancing, and cozying up by the fireplace. How could I say no?" Bree's expression shifted from shock to disbelief. "You look so different from how you dress at work," she blurted out. Emily smirked, adjusting the strap of her dress. "I like to dress up for special occasions. And you look stunning, too. That dress will be fun for Stanley to take off." Bree froze. "Stanley? How do you know about him?" Emily laughed lightly, her tone almost mocking. "Oh, everyone in the paralegal department knows about Stanley. The tax department, too. Stanley isn't exactly subtle." Bree's cheeks flushed. "We tried to be discreet." "Discreet?" Emily interrupted with a laugh. "From the moment Stanley arrived, he made his intentions obvious, and you didn't resist. Shorter skirts, plunging necklines, more makeup, and his favorite perfume. Honestly, you were an open book." Bree looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was supposed to be harmless, just a little flirting. Then I got caught up in it. I thought it would be just one night." I stepped forward, draping her shawl over her shoulders and guiding her toward the door. "One night, huh? Fine. Go, but don't come back until tomorrow morning. I've given you every chance to stay with me, but you chose him." Bree hesitated for a moment, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. "I'll be back," she said quietly as she stepped onto the porch. "Have fun tonight," I said, closing the door behind her. For a moment, I stood in silence, hearing her car pull away. My chest felt heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Things would never be the same again. Emily approached, her expression softening. "I can't imagine how you feel, Ty," she said gently. "But remember, no matter what choice Bree makes, you've already won." She reached up, cupping my face in her hands. Her lips met mine, a gentle, reassuring kiss that slowly deepened. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer as the kiss became more passionate. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavily. "Let's not waste the evening," Emily said with a small smile. "Show me this dinner you've prepared." I told Emily that dinner wasn't quite ready, but invited her to help if she felt like it. She agreed with a smile, following me into the kitchen. I pointed to 3 open bottles of wine, a crisp Chardonnay, a bold Cabernet, and a sweeter dessert option. She chose the Chardonnay. After pouring her a glass and tasting it myself, I playfully slipped an apron over her head and tied it around her waist. Standing behind her, I gave her a quick kiss, which made her laugh. "What's my assignment, chef?" she asked, clearly enjoying herself. "I've already baked half a pound of bacon," I said. "I need you to cut 5 strips into 1-inch pieces and mix them with the chopped iceberg lettuce. Then, dice the avocado and add it to the mix." While Emily worked, sipping her wine and chatting lightly, a sudden wave of self-doubt crept in. I glanced at her, the most stunning woman I'd ever been close to, and couldn't shake the thought that I might not measure up. My entire life I'd only been with one woman, Bree, while Emily might have had far more experience. The thought unnerved me. I stepped up behind her, gently placing my hands on her waist. "I've only ever made love to Bree," I confessed quietly. "It makes me worry that I won't be good enough for you." Emily paused and leaned back against me, her tone reassuring. "Ty, you have nothing to worry about. Just treat me the way you'd treat Bree, and let's see where it goes. If I want something different, I'll tell you, and if there's something you want, just say so. Whatever it is." She turned her head slightly and added with a playful smile, "And, by the way, I love foreplay." I kissed the back of her head, feeling a flicker of confidence return. "Thanks. Have you ever been a cheerleader? You sure know how to inspire someone." She laughed. "The salad's done," she announced, taking the bowl into the dining room. I followed, pulling out her chair and helping her sit before taking my own seat at the head of the table. Before starting, I refilled our glasses and raised mine for a toast. "To an unforgettable night," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I'll drink to that," I replied. Dinner unfolded beautifully. I served each course, and Emily complimented every dish, calling it a 5-star meal that could rival any fine dining experience. When dessert was finished, I told her to relax in the family room while I tidied up. Once the dining area was spotless, I joined her. The soft sounds of rain and distant thunder played on the stereo, creating a soothing backdrop. Emily was gently swaying to the music, lost in the moment. When I approached, she held out her hands, inviting me to dance. We moved together slowly, the closeness of the moment deepening. "This is perfect, Ty," she murmured. "It's been so long since I felt this romantic." "I feel the same," I admitted. After a moment of silence, she added, "For what it's worth, I haven't been with a man in years. And when I have, it's only been with men I truly liked." "I really like you, Ty." "That's good to know," I said, pulling her a little closer. "If I tell you I love you at some point tonight, don't be mad. I'll mean it, at least for as long as we're together. And when this ends, I hope we can stay close." The music slowed, and so did we, eventually just holding each other. Her arms were around my neck, mine resting on her waist. Her breath was warm against my skin as she ran her fingers through the hair at the back of my neck. I felt her body pressed against mine, her curves, her warmth. She must have felt my reaction, too. I leaned down and began to kiss her neck and collarbone, savoring her soft sighs. As the moment intensified, Emily gently stepped back. "Give me a few minutes to change into something more comfortable," she said with a teasing smile. "Feel free to do the same. Let's meet by the fireplace." I went to my room, slipping into black silk pajama pants and a matching t-shirt. Pouring myself a coffee with a splash of Bailey's, I settled on the couch to wait. A few minutes later, I heard her approach. Before I could turn, Emily's arms wrapped around the back of the couch. Her hands slid under my shirt, and she kissed my neck, sending a jolt of warmth through me. I turned onto my back, looking up at her. She stood there in a black satin robe, the fabric loosely tied at the waist. Beneath it, I could see the delicate lace of a negligee. Her hair was down, framing her face, and her legs were bare. I reached for her hand, pulling her over the back of the couch. She landed on me with a laugh, her robe parting slightly. I couldn't resist leaning up to kiss her. What started as a gentle kiss quickly deepened, her lips parting as we shared a passionate embrace. My hands roamed over her back, slipping the robe off her shoulders to reveal her smooth skin and the soft fabric of her negligee. She was breathtaking. I let the robe slide down her arms until it pooled on the floor, leaving her in just the negligee that clung to her figure. I kissed her again, losing myself in the moment, unable to resist her allure. As my kisses moved lower, I traced a path down Emily's body, lingering at her navel before continuing to her thighs. She began to writhe beneath me, her breathing quick and shallow. "I love you, Ty," she whispered between breaths. "I love you too, Emily," I replied, my words barely breaking the rhythm of the moment. I didn't want this night to end. I knew it would be the last time we shared something so passionate, and it seemed Emily felt the same. Tears slipped from her eyes as she clung to me. I held her tightly. kissing her lips, her face, and her neck as though trying to hold on to the moment. Eventually, we both sighed, the reality of dawn drawing the night to a close. I stepped out of the shower first, giving Emily time to finish while I dried off and dressed in casual clothes. She emerged moments later, and I handed her a soft, oversized towel. She had brought a change of clothes, and soon we were both ready to leave the house. "Do you want to grab brunch?" I asked. Her face lit up, and she nodded. "I'd love that." We headed to a nearby cheesecake factory in a bustling shopping center. It was just opening when we arrived at 10 a.m., and we lingered over coffee and conversation before heading back. By the time I returned home around noon, Bree's car was already in the garage. I entered through the side door, passing through the kitchen, where I noticed a pot of coffee on the stove. Pouring myself a cup, I made my way to the dining room and found Bree seated at the table, a coffee cup in front of her. Her posture was rigid, her expression stern. In contrast, I felt calm, almost smug. A faint smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. It was time to address the elephant in the room. "So," I began, "how was your evening?" "Fine," Bree replied flatly, her tone guarded. "And yours?" she asked pointedly. "Honestly," I said, leaning back with a satisfied grin, "it was incredible. Emily was affectionate and eager, and we spent the night exploring ways to make each other happy." Bree lowered her head, and I saw a single tear roll down her cheek. Guilt surged through me. This wasn't the victory it had seemed in the moment. It felt more like the biggest mistake of my life. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Didn't Stanley live up to your expectations?" "It wasn't Stanley," she snapped, then softened. "It was me. I couldn't stop thinking about you and Emily, about what you were doing together. She's so beautiful, so alluring. I knew you'd have a better time with her than I ever could with Stanley." She took a deep breath before continuing. "He tried to be gentle, to make the night romantic, but I couldn't focus." I started drinking wine at the bar before dinner. By the time we sat down, I'd already had too much. I barely touched my food, I couldn't eat, and just kept drinking. Stanley tried to stop me, suggested we dance in the living room to lighten the mood, but I was tipsy and clumsy. He grew frustrated and said we should go upstairs. She hesitated, her voice shaking. "In the room, he kissed me, but it felt wrong. Then he started undressing me, and I didn't resist. I let him, but I felt nothing. No excitement, no connection. He could tell. When it was over, he looked at me with disappointment and said, 'That was the worst experience of my life. What's wrong with you? You wanted this, and now you're acting like you don't care.'" He got dressed and left, muttering something about finding someone else at the bar. I just lay there and cried myself to sleep. Her voice grew quieter. When I woke up, it was morning. The sun was shining, and I felt empty. I showered, dressed, and left the hotel. I wanted to come home and talk to you, but you weren't here. "Emily and I went to brunch," I said plainly. "She went home afterward. I'll admit, I'm sorry your night didn't go as planned, but I'm not entirely sorry. Mine did." Bree's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I'm so sorry, Ty," she said earnestly. "I regret ever getting involved with Stanley. Now I see it for what it was. He just wanted to use me. He never cared about me." I leaned back, my tone sharp. "Well, maybe you'll have better luck next time." "There won't be a next time," she said quickly, her voice breaking. "I'll never do this again. I want us to go back to being monogamous, to the way things were before. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the wife you deserve." "Not so fast, Bree," I said firmly. "You've spent months building an emotional relationship with him and weeks plotting this night together. Now that it's blown up in your face, you want me to forget everything and pretend it never happened? That's not how this works. I'm not even sure I want to stay married to you. You betrayed me, humiliated me, and tried to turn me into a fool. And now you expect me to forgive and forget like nothing happened? No, Bree. It doesn't work like that." Bree sat silently, tears streaming down her face, as the weight of my words hung in the air. Bree's eyes searched mine, filled with a mixture of desperation and hope, but I continued without hesitation. "Next year, I'm making some changes for myself. I'm getting a gym membership, and once a month, I'll take myself out on a date with whoever I choose. If those dates lead to something more, so be it. At the end of the year, I'll reassess our marriage. If I decide it's no longer working for me, I'll file for divorce. If I find I'm happy, I'll consider becoming exclusive with you again. You'll have this year to prove that staying together is worth it. Take it or leave it. If you can't accept these terms, I'll start divorce proceedings on Monday. Let me know your decision." Bree's voice trembled as she began to speak. "Ty, I love you. I know I've taken you for granted, and I regret it deeply. The thought of you being with another woman would liquidate me, just like last night did. But losing you entirely, that would destroy me. I'll agree to your conditions. And I promise I'll spend this year showing you I can be the best wife you've ever dreamed of. By the end of it, I'll make sure you'll never want to leave me." "Then it's settled," I said simply. The rest of the day passed without incident. I spent some time working in the yard and running errands. Before heading out, I offered her an olive branch. "If you clean up the mess from last night and straighten up the house, I'll take you out to TGI Fridays for dinner. We can split a plate of ribs." It wasn't much, but it was my way of trying to restore some normalcy. As the probationary year began, Bree seemed to embrace her role wholeheartedly. She became an attentive and doting wife, and her efforts felt genuine. Our meals improved dramatically. Dinner often featured a small salad or soup, a hearty main course like steak with potatoes or vegetables, and even dessert. Each meal was accompanied by a glass of wine. Afterward, we worked together to clean up. Our closeness also intensified, becoming more frequent and passionate. Bree made it clear there was nothing she wouldn't do to rekindle the spark between us. One evening, over a particularly good dinner, Bree broke the silence with a casual remark. "I spoke to Emily today." I tried to keep my expression neutral. "Oh? What about?" Bree smiled faintly. "You, me, and her." "What did she say?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Well," Bree began, "the first thing she did was invite me to lunch. She took me to one of her favorite restaurants nearby. Over a couple of glasses of wine and some salad, I asked her point blank if she planned to take you away from me. She laughed and said, 'Absolutely not. Ty and I were a one-time thing. We're best friends now, but we'll never be together like that again. If anything, I think he's still upset about how hurt he was by your actions.'" Bree hesitated, then continued. "I told her how ashamed I am of what I did to you and to our marriage. I also told her about your decision to date other women once a month and reevaluate our relationship at the end of the year." "And what was her advice?" I asked. "She said, don't try to compete with other women. Instead, make staying home with you so irresistible that he won't want to go on those dates. Turn your home into the better option. That's exactly what I plan to do." "If that's your strategy," I replied with a small grin, "don't be surprised if I set up a fake date just to see what you've got planned." A few weeks later, I found myself walking into the offices of Thomas, Dixon, and Harris with a smile on my face. Emily, as usual, was stationed at her desk, guarding the entrance to the partners' offices. When she saw me, her face lit up. She stood and walked over to greet me, wrapping me in a warm hug. "Ty, it's great to see you," she said warmly. "We've been expecting you, or rather, Mr. Thomas has." As I held her briefly, I asked, "Any idea what he wants to talk to me about?" Emily smirked. "Of course I know everything that happens here. But it's better if you hear it from him." She returned to her desk and buzzed Mr. Thomas. After a brief exchange, she gestured for me to follow her, leading me to his office and opening the large, carved wooden door. She gave me a quick smile before closing it behind me. "Ty," Mr. Thomas greeted warmly, standing and extending his hand. "Good to see you again. Please, have a seat." I took the chair opposite him, and he leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "I wanted to talk to you for 2 reasons, both of which directly or indirectly involve you." He paused for a moment before continuing. "First, I thought you'd like to know that we've updated our company's fraternization policy. It's much more comprehensive now. It explicitly outlines the consequences of workplace relationships, whether between employees or employees and clients. I've got a copy here for you to review at your leisure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it." I thanked Mr. Thomas for addressing the issue I had brought to his attention previously. His thoughtfulness and initiative had not gone unnoticed. "Ty," he said, his tone considerate, "without prying too much, how are things at home? I genuinely hope you and Bree are finding your way forward." He paused briefly before adding, "I visited Bree's department a few days ago. We didn't talk about anything personal, strictly work-related matters. I wanted to check on her team's progress and see if there were any challenges I could help with. From what I observed, she seemed happy and at ease. Not wanting to delve into the current state of my marriage, I kept my response simple. Things are improving, and I'm optimistic that we'll be all right in the long run." Mr. Thomas smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "Now let me tell you the second reason I wanted to speak with you today. It concerns a letter I sent to Hughes, Duvet, and Lewis, the firm where Stanley Wilbur is employed. Despite everything, Stanley did provide excellent assistance with a particularly complex tax issue we faced. His expertise was instrumental, and I made sure to acknowledge that. However, he added, lifting a piece of paper from his desk, I also felt compelled to address another, less favorable aspect of his behavior. I thought you might want to hear what I wrote. Adjusting his glasses, Mr. Thomas began to read aloud. Dear Steve, you have already received an official performance report regarding Stanley Wilbur's contributions to Thomas, Dixon, and Harris. His knowledge and expertise were invaluable in resolving a challenging tax case, and he went above and beyond by equipping our attorneys with skills to manage similar cases in the future. However, this letter is informal and private, intended to share a different perspective. While Stanley demonstrated commendable technical abilities, his personal conduct during his time here was problematic. He initiated a relationship with one of our married employees, which escalated to physical involvement. This inappropriate relationship caused significant turmoil in the employee's personal life, straining her marriage to the point where its future remains uncertain. Lawyers already contend with a less-than-stellar reputation in the public eye, often seen as valuing profit over ethics or winning over justice. In this profession, integrity is paramount. Stanley's actions raise concerns about his personal honesty, which could very well extend to his professional behavior. With this in mind, I urge you to monitor the work Stanley performs at your firm carefully. While this letter is strictly between us, I trust you'll take whatever action you believe is appropriate, or none at all. The choice is yours. Sincerely, William. Mr. Thomas folded the paper and set it aside. This letter doesn't capture everything Stanley put you and Bree through, but it ensures that his actions won't come without repercussions. I doubt this will help him advance in his career, at least not as quickly as he might hope. This is the best I can do for you, Ty, he continued. I hope it brings some sense of closure, knowing that Stanley won't escape unscathed. I nodded, gratitude evident in my expression. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Your support means a lot to me. As I left his office, I found myself lost in thought, processing the conversation. I didn't even notice Emily standing nearby until she gently interrupted. How are you feeling about everything? She asked softly, studying my face. I took a moment before replying. Honestly, I feel good about how it's all played out. Things are starting to come together. I can't thank you enough for being there for me through all of this. Emily smiled warmly and pulled me into a tight hug. Don't forget, Ty, she said softly. I've grown from this too. I really did love you while we were together. And I loved you too, I replied, my voice steady yet filled with emotion.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
The office was cold when he arrived, but that was not so strange as the snow was falling heavily outside, creating the illusion of an untarnished world. He loved the solitude of the office at this time of the day. Everything was so peaceful. He turned up the heat in the office and began making coffee so that his coworkers would have something to take the edge off of the cold when they started to arrive in an hour or so. This had been his delegated task during every working day for the last 20 years of his employment. In the summer, the office was hot, so he would turn on the AC, and in the winter, he would take care of the heat. Over the years, this had become his favorite time of the workday. As he went about his appointed tasks, he thought about the ritual in accomplishing them. A ritual he had established during 20 years of preparing the office to greet its workers. Now that he was quickly approaching 30 years with the company, he marveled at how fast the time had gone. He also thought about the fact that in a few months he would be deprived of this morning detail as he had put in his paperwork to retire. He knew it was time. He felt it in his bones and in every ache of his arthritic hands. He also understood the fact that he would be retiring alone, a fact that still ate at his soul. Finishing all his tasks and preparing the office to accept the daily influx of workers, he grabbed a cup of freshly brewed coffee and sat heavily at his desk. This was the concluding part of his ritual when he got to bask in the enjoyment of his coffee and the quiet reflections on his life before the organized pandemonium of the new workday began. Sitting comfortably, he considered the photograph on his desk once again. The picture never changed, but his perceptions of it often did. Sometimes he was sad thinking about what he had lost. Other times, he was incensed thinking of what had been his but now wasn't. Today was unlike either of those types of days. Today he just felt muddled by the events of the last 18 months of his life. No matter how many times he had looked at the picture and observed the way she held both man's hands, a deep aching, born of the awareness that even on that happy occasion she was already another man's woman would come over him as sure as the tide reaching the shore. The photograph itself was in a beautiful oaken frame, a gift to him by his lifelong best friend, Jerry Williams. As he focused on the photo for the millionth time, he took it all in again, reliving in his memory the time they had all flown down to St. Augustine, Florida for a small winter vacation, just the three of them, his wife, himself, and his best friend. Jerry had been living with them for the last few months after his last wife threw him out. As he had no place to go, we offered him a place to stay until he could get back on his feet. This little mini vacation to Florida was his idea, and Kathy had fallen in love with the idea. So, there we were, in Florida for a long weekend break. The setting of the picture was a quaint beachside restaurant where the three of us were sitting at a table, all clasping hands and smiling at the camera. Recalling the moment from his memory once again, they had been drinking and all of them were a bit tipsy. When another tourist passed by our table, Kathy had asked the man to take a picture of us all and had handed him Jerry's camera to perform the task. Looking back on it, I should have been tipped by the way she just appropriated the camera without even asking. You see, Jerry was really attached to his camera, and nobody touched it without his express permission. On that day, Kathy grabbed it and handed it over as if it was hers. Jerry never said a word, which I thought was strange at the time, but I put it down to his just being polite and avoiding any unpleasantness. The photograph itself showed the three of them sitting from left to the right at a bar's high-top table. On the far left of the photo was yours truly, Ryan Brown, with an actual smile on my face. It had been so long since he had really smiled that he now often wondered if he still had any left in him. Next to Ryan was his wife, Kathy. In the picture, his wife wore a smile which clearly showed her pleasure at being the focal point of the two men next to her. Sitting at the far right was his ex-best friend, Jerry. He picked up the frame and absorbed the details of the picture in the same way a military officer would study the photos from a bombing mission in an effort to determine the damage inflicted on the enemy. Kathy, his wife and the love of his life, was beautiful. Outside of that statement, nothing else really needed to be said. He had loved her since the first day he met her, and no matter what age or time had done to change her countenance, he never saw it because to him she was as beautiful as the first time he had laid eyes on her. As he looked at her face, he noted that her head was turned to her left towards Jerry, not to her right to share the moment with her husband. He also noted again the way she was holding his hand. Kathy was clasping his hand in a sterile fashion, barely holding on to it. In the previous months, he had examined that detail 100 times, and he had determined that the way she held his hand was symbolic. She was only nominally holding on to him as she focused on her true love sitting to her left. Now, for the millionth time, he again focused on her left hand, noting how her fingers were intertwined with Jerry's, clasping his hand so firmly you could see the white of her knuckles. Her grip was almost as if she was staking her claim on him and ensuring that he would not get away from her. Ryan shook his head in dismay as he wondered when it was that he had lost her love. Finally, Ryan now looked to the last person in the photo, his former best friend, and someone he had trusted since they were kids. Jerry had been my best friend since grade school. In fact, he was the guy who had actually introduced me to my wife. I thought that I knew Jerry better than any other person in my life, and still had a hard time believing that he would really have slept with Kathy. However, realizing that Jerry was Jerry, it was in retrospect not all that surprising. In high school, Jerry was on the weightlifting team and developed a terrific physique. To say he was popular with the girls would have been an understatement. The standing joke in our school was to call Jerry Tarzan. The name really seemed to fit because just like the king of the jungle, he seemed to control just about every woman he went after. However, by our senior year, the name Tarzan had taken on an insulting connotation as Jerry had broken up so many relationships. Jerry really came to hate the nickname, but he never saw the harm in stealing other men's girls. During the whole time we were in school, I stood by Jerry, even though it sickened me to watch him take girl after girl and use them for his pleasure. The amount of collateral damage he did was really immense, and by the end of high school, I was about the only friend he had left. I think that the problem with Jerry was that while he could get women, he just never seemed to be able to keep them, and this prompted him to keep taking them away from other guys. He once told me he liked the challenge. I guess that the reason I backed him during that time was that throughout school, Jerry had never done anything but good for me. I always knew that whatever happened, he would always have my back. After high school, I joined the Navy, and when I came back on leave, it was Jerry who set me up with Kathy. After she and I met, we were inseparable. Even though we had a long-distance relationship, we both lived for those precious moments when I could return home on leave. When I went back to my ship, she wrote religiously, and I knew that she was a keeper. Finally, my enlistment ended, and I was discharged. As soon as I got home, we were married, and I went to school on the GI Bill. Jerry was actually the best man at my wedding, even though Kathy's parents hated him with a passion. I asked her why her parents did not like Jerry, but neither she nor my in-laws would ever discuss him. Unfortunately, it took 33 years to find out what Kathy's parents had readily discerned about Jerry so many years ago. He was not an honorable man. Invariably, I began to make comparisons between Jerry and myself. Even pushing 60, Jerry was still well-proportioned and muscular, a product of the daily workouts he had practiced since high school. In addition to his physical prowess, which was emphasized by a t-shirt that showed off his muscles for effect, Jerry just looked good. He had kept all his hair, which was now highlighted by the gray streaks that made him look distinguished. I, on the other hand, was almost as opposite. I never developed the six-pack abs or the huge cannons on my arms. My hair had thinned out quite a bit, and I carried a spare tire around my gut for emergencies. If the truth be told, as painful as it is, I could see why Kathy was more impressed by my old friend than me. The only area that I had surpassed Jerry was in reliability and fidelity. Whereas I had kept my wife and job for 30 years and have never strayed, he had gone through 4 wives. At least 2 of his marriages had ended up in divorce court because of affairs. Add to that he was in re-anger of losing the automotive repair garage his father had left him because he cut corners and utilized substandard parts in his repairs. Since his father's death, he had managed to run a proud business once known for honesty and integrity into a cut-rate, fly-by-night operation. The only reason that I found out about the 2 of them was due to a disgruntled employee of Jerry who tracked me down to tell me about his boss and my wife. With the information he gave me, I confronted them and found out that indeed it was all true. The thing that hurt the most was when Kathy held on to him when I confronted them over the depth of their affair. Seeing that, I realized how much she cared for him, so I simply left my marriage with all the dignity I could muster. I would like to say that justice prevailed, but the divorce really went badly for me. Kathy got the house and a chunk of my retirement. I, on the other hand, got the satisfaction of knowing that I had always been square with her and had taken care of her right up to the end. From my initial discovery of their affair to the present day was a total of 18 months. Since the divorce became final, it was now approaching a year in just a few more days. I felt the anger rising again in my guts over the injustice of what they and the courts had done to me, but then I forced myself to regain my composure and returned the picture to its place on my desk. As I was replacing it, my eyes read the words on the little brass plaque at the bottom of the frame that Jerry had inscribed, "Friends Forever." Even in that he had lied. The first employees began to arrive at work, and I turned myself away from personal issues and began to do my job. Work always seemed to be a tonic for me, and soon I had forgotten all about the 2 of them. The day went quickly, and about 15 minutes to quitting time my phone rang. Picking it up, I smartly answered, "Welcome to ABC Company. This is Ryan Brown speaking. How may I be of service to you?" The line remained silent for a few seconds, and I was about to hang up when her voice tentatively spoke. "Ryan, it's Kathy. Please don't hang up. You could have knocked me over with a feather," but I kept it together, and with as much composure as I could muster simply answered, "What do you want, Kathy?" The phone was again silent for another awkward few seconds before her voice once again came on the line. "Ryan, it's been nearly a year since the divorce, and I really need to see you. Could you come for dinner tonight?" I was shocked, and in a nasty tone that was unheard by her in my old life, I replied, "I don't think I really want to break bread with the man who stole my wife and the woman who so willingly became his concubine. However, I do thank you for your offer." Kathy shot back in an almost panicky voice, "Jerry will not be here, I promise. I really need to see you. Please, Ryan." I took a deep breath and asked the inevitable question, "Why, Kathy? What could possibly be so important that after a year you need to suddenly talk with me?" She hurriedly interjected, "I need to set the record straight on us, Ryan. I also truly miss you and want to see you again. Please, Ryan. I've even made your favorite dinner, pot roast and all the trimmings. I swear it will be just us and no strings attached. What do you say, Ryan?" When I did not answer immediately, she rejoined, "I remember that you used to be pretty daring. Have you changed that much?" I thought for a moment. "When you say we will be alone, where will he be?" She quizzically replied, "You mean Jerry?" My voice sounded hollow even to me as I said, "Yes." Her voice sounded sad as she began to speak again. "It's hard to believe that you still can't even speak his name, Ryan, but don't worry. He won't be home till very late. He is having trouble at the shop, so he has been working late. A lot." I was displeased, just listening to her talk about him with such a protective domestic attitude, and it got to me. I decided that I really didn't need the aggravation anymore, so I began, "Gee, Kathy, as much as I love your pot roast, I just don't." She cut me off, sensing my refusal. "Ryan, please. I'm sorry, but I need to speak to you. Give me a chance." Listening to the emotion in her voice, I decided against my better judgment to take her up on her offer. Okay, Kathy, you win. What time do you want me to come over? I could almost feel the relief in her voice as she hurriedly rejoined, come home at your regular time, all right? I'll see you then, and thank you, Ryan. What could I say but you're welcome and a quick goodbye? When I got out of work, the snow was still falling pretty good. I almost enjoyed the ride to my old home as it felt comfortable and brought me back to better times. I was surprised at how little things had changed in the old neighborhood. Somehow I just assumed that since my life had changed so much over the last year and a half that everything else must have changed too. The house looked good clothed in the white of snow. It gave it an unsoiled look, although I felt that its occupants now were as morally unclean as could be. The sun was going down early as it always did this time of year, and the lights were on inside, giving the house a warm glow. I noticed that there were no tire tracks in the snow on the driveway, so I concluded that my wife had taken the day off for this meeting. She must have been pretty sure that I was going to accept her offer. I shut the car off and had opened the car door when the porch light came on. There in the doorway stood my former wife, and I felt my heart involuntarily do a flip in my chest. No matter how much she had hurt me, there was no denying that I still loved her. As I got closer, her face seemed to glow, and she was smiling with genuine happiness. Thank God you came, Ryan. I was worried that you might have changed your mind. Come on in, sweetheart, and get out of the cold. I was confused as to why she was being so familiar with me. After all, we were divorced, and she was now living openly with my ex-best friend in the house I had bought. Sometimes I can't figure people out. Nonetheless, I followed her orders and entered into my old home. Again, I was surprised as things had not changed in the year and a half since I left. There were the same pictures on the wall, the same furniture, and even the same television set. Kathy came up and hugged me like it was the best moment of her life, but when she moved in to kiss me on the lips, I turned my face away. She stood back from me and gave me a look that told me she was hurt. However, she rebounded quickly and with realistic concern in her voice proclaimed, "My God, Ryan, you are skin and bone. You need to eat honey and put some meat back on those bones." I was sarcastic, but then again I wanted to be, well, losing weight just seems to go hand in hand with losing your home, your marriage, and your life. But I might be wrong on that. Her face again reflected the disappointment she was experiencing at this first meeting in a year, but she was a trooper and plodded on, "I am sorry about what happened between us, Ryan. You must believe that I never wanted to hurt you, but things just got out of control. I was hoping in the year we have been apart that your anger might have abated a little, so that we might try to make amends, but I can see I was wrong on that point. Listen, let's just have a good dinner, and see if we can pack some food into you, all right?" I looked at her and surprised myself for feeling sorry for her distress. By now, I was also awkwardly wondering why I had accepted her invitation, but as I was here, I decided to make the best of it and with sincerity responded, "I am sorry for my actions, Kathy. Please accept my apology for making this meeting uncomfortable. I would like to hear what you have to say, but can I freshen up first?" The light seemed to come back on in her eyes, and with almost a glee she responded, "Sure, Ryan. You know where the bathroom is. I have to go and attend to our dinner anyway." I smiled and then headed down the hall to the guest bathroom. Jerry had moved in with us about 6 months before my marital collapse. He had been staying in our guest room and therefore utilized the guest bathroom. When I went in, I mentally made a quick check of things to ascertain his personal belongings were there, but then left to use the master bathroom located in what used to be our bedroom. Returning to that room made me feel sad for all the good years we shared, but I drove those thoughts from my mind as I entered the bathroom. Just like the guest bathroom, it was impeccable. Kathy had cleaned both of them from top to bottom to ensure any inspection would yield just what she wanted me to believe, and that was Jerry was still residing in the guest room. As I opened the medicine cabinet, it struck me, the left half of it was empty. That could be because after I moved out she never utilized my space, or it could mean that she recently cleaned out one half and forgot to spread her things out again. I found the idea of her not moving into the space formerly occupied by my toiletries for over a year to be rather far-fetched. The most logical explanation was that Kathy had moved Jerry's things out for tonight. After using the facilities and checking the beds in both rooms, I couldn't help but notice that they too were recently cleaned and changed. I then returned back to Kathy and dinner. I was surprised to find that she had set the dining room table instead of using the kitchen. As I noted this, she came out with a bottle of my favorite beer in hand, and then she spoke with a lilt in her voice. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes, Ryan. I thought you might like one of these while I'm getting everything out." I accepted the beer from her and wondered what she was setting me up for. "Thank you, Kathy. This will do very nicely." As she began to turn and move to the kitchen, I spoke again. "Where is Jerry staying these days?" She seemed to flinch momentarily, but quickly recovered as she lightly replied, He still stays in the guest room, Ryan. We are just friends these days, and that is it. With that, she was gone, heading into the kitchen. Dinner was soon served, and as the first beer had gone down easily, Kathy quickly replaced it with a second one. True to her word, we did not speak of us or the troubles we have had over the last year and a half, but still managed to cover a respectable number of neutral subjects like work, health, food, and friends we used to share together when we were a couple. All in all, the supper went well, as did the next 2 beers that she supplied me, as well as a second helping of pot roast, which made my taste buds miss my marriage all over again. After tonight, it would take a while to consume the frozen dinners which had become my lot in life with any relish. Finally, with the neutral subjects exhausted and feeling full and content for the first time in a year, she chose to initiate her real agenda. Ryan, it has been a year now, honey, and I was hoping that you might have gotten over it enough so that we might talk about us. I felt the relaxing effect of the beers begin to wear off as I retorted, there is no us. Besides, getting over the trauma of the 2 people you loved the most in the world betraying you is a little tough to do. This isn't like I caught a cold or broke a bone. For what you 2 did to me, there is no cure, and I doubt, short of having my memory destroyed by a surgical procedure, that I will never get over it, as you so put it. However, we are here, so please say what you have to say. She seemed a little put off by my attitude and looked uncomfortable as she continued on. All right, Ryan, I will. I don't know where to start this, so I guess an apology is the right place. I am sorry, Ryan, truly and regretfully, for ruining our marriage and hurting the best thing that ever came into my life, and that is you. I am not sure why I did what I did, but if I could go back and change things so that the affair never happened, you can rest assured that I would. She stopped suddenly and looked into my eyes as she spoke with firmness that I had only seen in her a few times in our entire marriage. Ryan, I know I screwed up, and I know that it was my entire fault, but I need you back in my life. I dream about us every night. I think about us all the time, and I miss you in my life. She paused a second before she implored, Ryan, I want another chance, and if you can see your way clear to granting it, I would do anything. Sign anything and take any type of test or counseling you want. I realize I have lost your trust and respect, but if there is any love left in you for me, I want to be your wife again. Please, honey, I want us back. She seemed drained and her face was tight with tension as she wrapped up her speech. To say I wasn't moved would be a lie, and to say that at some level I didn't want exactly what she was proposing would have been a bigger lie. But the pain and humiliation of the last year still weighed heavily on me. I noticed that she was gripping the table, and her knuckles were white just like they were in the picture on my desk. I took a swig of my beer as I took a few seconds to think about what she said and how I wanted to respond. Finally, I spoke. Kathy, first off, let me just say that you are not solely to blame for the affair. You had help in the form of a well-practiced seducer I trusted since grade school. I knew him as a kid, and even then he loved to move in on girls who were going steady and take them from their boyfriends. It is like a big game for him. He earned the name Tarzan in school because he was the king of the jungle and would take his Jane wherever he and whenever he wanted. I had even stood by him in those days in a dozen fights from jilted boyfriends seeking revenge. He grew to hate the nickname Tarzan and would fight anyone who called him that to his face. Then he was my friend, and I felt that I had to stand by him even though he was in the wrong. Now, 40 years later, I am brutally aware of just how wrong I was and how twisted he is inside to go after those women he can't have. Maybe my marriage being ruined by him was some form of cosmic karma come back to repay me for the mistakes of my youth. I paused as I looked into her eyes, the same eyes I had loved since I first saw them. The one thing about Williams that I truly believed was that he would never try to steal my girl like he did with all the others. Boy, was I wrong on that one. I paused and realized that I wanted to hold her so badly it hurt. So you see, while it is noble of you to take the blame, you can in reality only take half of the responsibility. He must take his share of the blame also. Also, I think that you need to realize that he cannot and will not remain faithful to you. Her face showed a glimmer of hope as I continued. Let me ask you this. If, and that is a big if, I agree to your request, how will you end it with the slug? She fired her reply back rapidly as if she was prepared for this one. I have told Jerry already that I want you back, and if you allow me back in your life, then he is out of mine totally. I knew her, and I believed her. However, I knew Jerry too, and he could be very persuasive in getting what he wanted. And if he was like me, then he would still want her and do whatever he needed to do to get her back. As Kathy stared hopefully at me, I suddenly had a question for her that I had never asked her since we first met. Throughout our years together, it just seemed unimportant, but now I needed to know. Kathy, when Jerry introduced us, how well did you know him? I noticed that she looked away as I asked the question, avoiding looking into my eyes. She recovered and looked directly at me as she hesitantly began. Are you sure you really want to know, Ryan? I nodded my head yes, and she took a deep breath and began. All right, Ryan. I guess you deserve to know the whole truth. I met Jerry at a party. He was good-looking and funny, and I fell for him like a ton of bricks. I was a young girl, and he really did it for me. We had a relationship that lasted a total of 3 glorious weeks. That was about the span of his girlfriends back then. Her face looked sad as she pushed on. I was in love with him by that time, and even though he told me we should see other people, I kept bugging him. After a while, he promised to fix me up with someone who he said I would really love, and was a better man for me than himself. Well, to be truthful, I only went along simply because I thought that once he saw me with another guy, he would realize his mistake and want me back. Well, that guy he was talking about was you, and he was right. I fell in love with you almost from the first date. I was also right that he would want me back, but it took 33 years for that to happen. Back then we both decided that you really never needed to know our past, and we kept it that way until now. She finished and looked utterly overcome. I wasn't sure if I was angry or just supremely disappointed. So you two were lovers before we met, and then you both colluded to keep that bit of information from me since the day we met. I looked at her now, sitting with a downcast look. I have to give you credit for at least being able to keep a secret. I needed to ask her the next question, as it was the one that had been gnawing at me for over a year, but it would not come out. I started and stopped a few times before Kathy noticed my indecision, and with the clarity of a wife for over 30 years correctly read and interpreted my body language. She spoke with a sarcastic temerity. I know what you want to ask, Ryan, and don't you think I have asked myself the same question a million times since you found out? I don't know why we became lovers again. I could blame it on the fact you weren't there, or that the booze got to me, or that Jerry was irresistible, or maybe it was the fact that I remember how good a lover he was, or maybe it was a combination of all of these or none of these. To be truthful with you, I don't know. I'm sorry, that's all I can really tell you, but it's true. Well, that was at least an answer to what had been eating at me for over a year. But I would still always wonder if she was just trying to spare my feelings because she just felt that I was inadequate. Now I took a deep breath and started into painful territory. Are you still sleeping with him? Her face broadcast her feelings, and as I interpreted them, she was afraid of hurting me but didn't want to lie. With trepidation, she responded, yes. Even though I already instinctively knew the answer, it still hurt. I looked at her eyes and probed, why, Kathy? If I meant so much to you, and you still want me back, why are you still sleeping with him? Frankly, after all the pain he has caused, why is the jerk still living here? She looked a little wild as she retorted fast and loudly, because I need someone, Ryan. I am so alone I can't stand it. I miss you so much that I needed a substitute and he was here. That's why. With that, she broke down and began to sob with her head cradled in her hands and her body racked by the fury of her tears. I felt exhausted and knew that it was time to go home. I stood and walked around the table to help Kathy to her feet. Her tears were falling freely, and a part of me still wanted to ease her pain. She sniffled and stopped, and then reading me again. She threw her arms around me as if trying to keep me with her. I stood there like a log and did not reciprocate the hug. I finally broke away and spoke. I have to go home now, Kathy. She nodded, knowing what my words really meant, and then went into her protective wife mode. Wait. Before you go, let me get you some of the leftover pot roast to take home with you. She went to turn, and I held on to her hand. Never mind, Kathy. It's fine. I got my coat and was walking to the front door when it opened up and in walked Jerry. His face showed apprehension and hope when he saw me, and he spoke as if we were still friends. Ryan, how have you been? I gazed at him with a look of shock. Why would you give a damn how I have been? You ruin my life, destroy our friendship, and steal my wife, and you ask me how I am. Are you insane? To his credit, he looked repentant. I'm sorry, Ryan. I never planned it. Well, it just seemed to happen and then take on a life of its own. He paused and then continued, Ryan, we both miss you in our lives. Is there any way we could forget what happened between us and just try to rebuild our friendship? I no longer cared whether Kathy would get hurt in this, as I had to ask, sure. However, let me ask you a question, all right? He actually had a hopeful look on his face and nodded his assent when I fired off my question. When was the last time you screwed her? Hope faded from his face, and he hemmed and hawed before he answered me. I don't remember, Ryan, honest. I knew Jerry from the old days, and I also knew when he was lying, so I pushed forth again. Come on, Tarzan, you must remember the last time you put the meat to her. Isn't that what you used to say in high school after you scored some poor dumb schmuck's girlfriend, wasn't it? The word Tarzan hit home, and I could see anger flush his face, which is what I wanted. He puffed himself up and looked me straight in the eye as he coldly replied, Yeah, Ryan, that's what I used to say, and if you really want to know, I put the meat to her this morning, just like I do every morning. And she loved it, screaming for more of me inside her. He said it in anger, and I heard Kathy's inrush of breath, as she realized what he had just spoken. He stopped talking and looked from me to Kathy, and then tried to cover his tracks. "Ryan, I'm sorry. Kathy and I are through. We haven't had sex for months." "Really? I just said that because you used that stupid name, and you know how much I hate it." I looked from him to her, and in that moment, it became clear. There was no hope for a reconciliation of my marriage or my friendship. Both were liars and always had been. I no longer wanted to see either one, but I had something to say. "Look, both of you were my family for more years than I care to count, but it's over." I looked at Kathy. "As my wife, you should have been more honest about Jerry when we first met. If you had, we might not be here now. You lied to me by omission." She looked panicked and started to reply, but I held up my hand and she stopped. "Tonight, you gave me a convoluted reason for the why of it, but you never answered the big question of how." I turned to look at Jerry and could see his immature mind trying to make a joke about the mechanics of the sex act when I stopped him short when our eyes connected. "You were my friend and I had your back for many years. If I meant so much to you, how could you have stolen something from me that was my most precious treasure?" His eyes looked away from mine, and I could almost see the shame written on his face as he began to apologize once again until I told him to stop. Turning once again to my ex-wife, I spoke more gently than I felt. "You were my wife. You promised to be faithful until death do us part. How could you have traded my love and devotion to you for a tawdry affair with a two-timing ape like Tarzan here? You told me that you loved me, but I don't see it. When you love someone, you work at keeping them in your life. You threw me away like a piece of unwanted trash. You lied when we got married, and you continued to lie right through until tonight." Kathy began to speak in a rush. "Ryan, you're wrong. I do love you and I want to work this out. Jerry was a huge mistake, but I can make it right again. Please." She began to move towards me with her arms out to embrace me, but I moved back out of her reach. I pushed past Jerry and opened the front door. Kathy looked distraught while Jerry had recovered enough to just look sad. Before stepping out into the cold again, I looked at my ex and spoke in a formal tone. "Thank you for a lovely dinner. I truly enjoyed it. Have a good life, as I doubt that we will be seeing each other again." I looked at Jerry and it looked like he was going to say something, but I cut him off. "Well, Tarzan, looks like you got another Jane. Or should I say a Kathy? I just hope the price you paid was worth it." Before either could respond, I stepped out into the cold, shutting the door behind me. Reaching the car, I turned to see the front door fly open and Kathy in a determined voice call out, "It's not over for us, Ryan. I want you back and I will get you back no matter how long it takes. Jerry is gone tomorrow. You are my man, and we still belong together." She was still calling out some nonsense as I started my car and backed out from the driveway. Tomorrow was another day, and I had to get up early for work. The office was cold when he arrived, but that was not unusual as the snow was falling outside, creating the illusion of a clean world. He loved the solitude of the office at this time of the day. Everything was so peaceful. He turned up the heat in the office and began making coffee. Today, however, his ritual was going to be different. As soon as he finished turning up the heat and putting the coffee on, he sat at his desk and picked up the picture he had fixated on over the last 18 months. He looked at it one last time, and then he muttered one word, "Enough." With that word, he set to work dismantling the frame and removing its contents. Looking at the loose picture one last time, he tore it into small pieces and disposed of it in his trash can. Looking at the frame, he pondered on throwing it out too, but then rethought that idea. Instead of throwing it away, he put it back on the desk empty. Looking at it, he thought, "Enough grieving for what was. Now it's time to start living again. Fill that frame with new memories and forget the old ones." Thinking about it, he remembered that one of the secretaries had tried to set him up with a widow who was a friend of hers a month or so back. He decided then and there that he would ask her if that offer was still good when she arrived for work. He smiled to himself for the first time in a long time and savored the peace of the empty office and the smell and flavor of a fresh cup of coffee. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
He sat on a stool at the end of the bar, leaning against the wall, focused on a baseball game playing on one of the TVs. He was around 6 feet 1 inch and weighed about 190 pounds, smaller than my 6 feet 4 inches, 255-pound frame. Still, I planned to tread carefully. I hoped he would hear me out without losing his temper. "Are you Jack Wilson?" I asked as I approached him. He nodded, and I continued, "Can I buy you a drink?" "Who are you?" "I don't know you, and I'm not interested in another drink. I'm meeting my wife soon," he replied. "My name's Steve, but that's not important. What you really need to know is what's been happening with Julie while you were away on your sales trip," I said, trying to spark his curiosity rather than anger. "My sales trip? How do you know I was gone?" And how do you know my wife's name? He asked, his voice tinged with anger. I hesitated, stumbling over my words. This situation could escalate quickly. Oh hell, there's no easy way to say this, Jack. I know your wife's name because I spent most of tonight sleeping with her at my place. That's when the fight broke out, though it wasn't much of a fight. He hit me, and I went down hard. For a smaller guy, he packed a punch. It happened so fast I didn't realize what had hit me until I found myself on the barroom floor. He stood over me, shouting for me to get up so he could hit me again. I stayed put, looking up at him, trying to think of something to say. I owed him that, but I wasn't going to be his punching bag. Why would I tell a man I was sleeping with his wife? It was all about payback. My name is Stephen Harrow, and I'm a moron. Well, not really, but I feel like one. You see, only a moron or a husband, and I'm both, wouldn't have seen what was going on behind my back. I didn't see it, or even suspect it until, cliché of clichés, I saw my wife somewhere she shouldn't have been. She told me that her sister had broken up with her fiancé and needed cheering up. Apparently my wife was the designated cheerer-upper and went to console her distraught sister. She called me at work and told me about visiting her sister and that it would probably be late before she got home. There was a casserole in the fridge, and I could heat it up in the microwave for my dinner. I decided to hell with some stupid healthy tuna shit casserole. I decided to grab a beer and burger at a new place I had heard good things about. It was about 10 miles from my office in the opposite direction to my home. When I walked into O'Toole's, it only took a few seconds to spot the two of them. The man she was sitting next to in a booth at the back of the bar might have similar features as her sister, but he had the wrong fixtures, if you know what I mean. In addition, I've never seen my wife kiss her sister the way she was kissing this guy. It was full-blown let me check you tonsils type of kiss. I wasn't really that surprised. I guess I've been expecting something like this for the last 3 months. My future wife Estella Rogers, and I met in high school, dated a few times, and then went off to different colleges. We weren't in love or anything, and there were no sad goodbyes. We'd had fun together and then went on our way. Stella was not the most attractive girl at school. In fact, she was a little on the homely side. She wore glasses, was still carrying around some of her baby fat, and she had no grooming or fashion sense at all. What she did have was a satirical sense of humor, a quick mind, and man, she could really dance. Stella transformed on the dance floor, leaving the rest of us in her wake. She and I were a perfect match of two. If not ugly, then less than attractive people. I was tall, skinny, and uncoordinated with a more than average acne problem. If you looked in the dictionary under the word geek, you would have seen my picture. But put the two of us together, and we were good for each other. It was almost 6 years later that I saw her again. I was taking some postgraduate classes and took a break from my studies at an off-campus bar. It wasn't a place I normally went to, but that night I needed to decompress and relax. The place wasn't really very loud, just the normal ebb and flow of conversations going on, but then a sort of hush fell over the room. I was staring into the one beer I allowed myself and wondering how I was going to get through one of my classes without kicking the professor's butt. He was a liberal somewhere to the left of Karl Marx, and I was just a bit right of John Wayne. It got very quiet in the bar, and I looked up to see why. That's when I saw Stella. At first I didn't recognize her. It wasn't until she smiled and then laughed that I knew it was Stella. Man, she had really changed, and for the better. Stella had grown, evolved, or metamorphosed into a stunningly beautiful woman. Gone were the glasses, gone was the baby fat, and gone was the homely girl who didn't know how to dress or groom herself. In that girl's place was this woman who was dressed to the nines, this woman with long legs and a body you could bounce quarters off of, this woman with long golden hair and perfect makeup, this woman that made everybody stop and stare. Stella was so beautiful that when she walked across the bar room, even women would watch her. I couldn't believe the transformation in Stella. Man, I blew it when I let her go, I thought, and then laughed at myself. That had been back in high school, and we wouldn't have stayed together all this time anyway. Of course I had changed also. I was still tall, but I had filled out, the result of better nutrition and playing tight end in college. Playing football also improved my coordination, and I outgrew the acne problem. As I turned and started to leave the bar, I heard this melodious voice that I remembered very well, call my name. I turned, and there was Stella right in front of me. Hello, boyfriend. What's it been, about 6 years now? As she greeted me, she leaned against me, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed my cheek. Hi, Stella. Good to see you. I answered when I got my tongue unstuck from the roof of my mouth. I was the envy of every male in the joint, if only for a moment. Come join us and have a drink. We've got a lot of catching up to do, she said, pulling on my hand and leading me over to her group. Hey guys, pull up another table so Steve can join us. I watch as 3 or 4 people jump to do as she asked. It was ironic. The girl I had known was so shy that I was about the only one she talked to, and here she snapped out orders like a drill sergeant. Stella had definitely changed. One of the guys from the group asked what we wanted to drink and went to fetch them. It must be nice to have servants, I thought. Stella and I played catch-up for several minutes. After several "how are yous," "what's happened in the last 6 years and what are you doing nows?" I had to address the 400-pound gorilla at the table. I know Stella was waiting for it and I couldn't resist. "Damn, Stella, you look great. I almost didn't recognize you. You're a lot different than back in high school," I said, paying homage to this lovely creature. "Yep, I have changed and it's all because of you, Steve," she said, chuckling at the puzzled look on my face. "Me? Me? What do you mean it's because of me? I didn't do anything." She giggled and then laughed out loud. I've never liked a grown woman of 23 or 24 giggling. She should have outgrown that phase, but in Stella's case it was cute and sexy and made me want to hear more. I was staring at her, waiting for her to tell me how I'd made her change. Stella then explained why she blamed me, or maybe it was better to say gave me credit for her development. She said that when we parted after high school, she was crushed. Her looks, her personality, her shyness made me turn my back on her. At least that's what she thought. I started to deny the things she said, but before I could say anything, she held up her hand to stop me. We had never talked about love or commitment, but that didn't affect what I thought. We were going to different colleges, and it was natural that we would part. I didn't want to think about the logic or facts of our breakup, just that if I had been prettier, slimmer, and more polished, you wouldn't have left me, she told me. Again, that little laugh that in a younger female would be a giggle. "That's not the reason," I started to say, but Stella interrupted me. I know it wasn't true, but that's the way I felt at the time. So I decided to take action, to change myself into someone you would want. I went to college and immersed myself in Project Stella. I began to eat healthier and started an exercise regimen. I worked out in the school gym almost daily. I ran 3 times a week, building up to a 5-mile run, and I joined the drama club to get over my shyness. Stella stopped to finish her drink, lifted her empty glass, and waited while one of her minions brought her another. I even took a beauty course at a technical college to learn how to use makeup and style my hair. Next, I read all I could find on grooming and fashion. By my junior year, the change was almost complete. I still had to put everything I'd learned into practice. I began to flirt and interact with some of the men in my classes. I needed to see if I could get over being an introvert. She paused as if to gather herself before continuing. "Stella, I had no idea you felt that way in high school." I stepped in. "You have to remember I was a geek, a male version of what you felt like. I liked you and asked you out not because of how you looked, but because you were interesting to be with." I paused for a few seconds and said, "There was another reason that I asked you out, you know." "What was that?" "You said yes. You were the only girl that ever said yes when I asked for a date. At first that was the main reason, but by the 3rd date, I wanted to be with you because of you. We seemed to fit together. I regretted us having to say goodbye, but I was only 18 and had never thought beyond going to college. I hadn't intended or even thought that sitting and talking to an old friend would lead to true confessions." Stella gave me a warm smile, took my hand with both of hers, and leaned against me for a few seconds. "As good as you look, as confident as you seem, you must have men falling all over themselves to be with you," I said with a big smile. "No, there's nobody special, Steve. Oh, I've had 2 serious relationships since college, but something was missing, so we broke up," she replied. I motioned and indicated the others at the table, asking a silent question. Stella leaned closer so no one would hear her and said, "These people are just friends." "Well, not even friends, more like companions. That's called fetching drinks. He's asked me out at least a dozen times. I enjoy the attention, so instead of saying no, I smile, say maybe, and he keeps coming around. 2 of the 3 girls I'm helping change themselves like I did. In the meantime, they catch some of my rejects." She giggled again at the expression on my face. "Come on, you know that less attractive girls pal around with a pretty girl. It's not always for the friendship. It's to latch on to guys that they might never have a chance at. That doesn't say very much for them, does it?" I was surprised at her revelation. "It says they are smart enough to make the most of an opportunity," she replied. "What about the other 2? "The other 2 are going together. I used to date Brad, and when we stopped, Sherry caught him. They seem to be happy with each other, and that's a good thing. Sherry is one of my success stories, don't you know?" I had to smile grimly at the change in her personality. The girl I had known was shy, less than confident, almost withdrawn with everyone but me. The new Stella was confident to the point of being cocky or even overbearingly conceited. I think I liked the old Stella better. There was a hard shell around this new one. "Guess I better go. Got classes tomorrow morning. It's been, maybe interesting is the term, seeing you again, Stella. Good luck with your projects," I said, standing to leave. She stood, hugged me, and kissed my cheek again. The hug wasn't one of those A-frame hugs that women use, hug you but keep their body away from you. This was a full-body hug meant to show off how a woman feels. By the way, Stella felt damn good. Stella handed me a card and said, "Here's my home and cell numbers. Give me a call, and we'll talk some more." It was just short of being an order. Her Majesty, Stella the First, had spoken. Again, I couldn't believe the change in this woman. I had spent less than 2 hours with the new Stella, and I wasn't impressed. There was absolutely no doubt that her appearance and her confidence was improved, but she had lost the sweet, kind, thoughtful girl she had been. I didn't think it was a good exchange. Handing the card back to Stella, I said, "There's no need to talk again. We've went over our lives between then and now. You've moved on and don't need another member for your entourage. I'm glad you're happy, Stella. See ya." I walked away before she could respond or argue. I'd had enough of Her Majesty to last me. Just before I got to the door, I heard Kyle say, "How dare he talk to you like that? Want me to drag him back here and make him apologize?" Stella laughed out loud. "Do you actually think you could make him do anything he didn't want to? Look at the size of him, you idiot." It would have been interesting, and I was almost sorry that good old Kyle didn't try to drag me back because I was a little upset. I would have liked to share that feeling with someone. I was upset that my friend from high school had turned into such a conceited bitch. After Stella and I parted after high school to go to different colleges, I thought about her a lot. My first Christmas break, I went home to visit my folks and tried to reconnect with her, but her parents had moved. I tried to get her address from the college she attended, but of course they wouldn't give out any information or even verify that she was registered. I found out later using somewhat devious means that she wasn't attending the school I thought she was. I lost her trail and had no idea where she had gone. It made me a little sad. It wasn't love, but when I thought about that young girl, it was with fondness and appreciation. We had been good for each other back then. Maybe that's why the change in Stella made me angry. My good friend was gone. 3 weeks later, I had just finished a nutritious dinner of pepperoni pizza and a beer when someone knocked on my door. When I opened the door, who else but Stella stood their door? As if I didn't have enough on my plate. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she asked, smiling. After I waved her into the apartment, she looked around and commented a little sarcastically, I thought, "Nice place, Steve." I lived in a second-floor walk-up. It was a basic studio apartment with one big room which combined a living room, dining room, and a small galley-type kitchen with a bathroom through a doorway. My goal was a postgraduate degree, not entertaining guests, so it suited me. I worked for 2 years after getting my bachelor's degree and was able to save enough money to go back for postgrad classes. It helped that I was in information and systems analysis, so I could schedule my work and my classes around each other. Basically, I worked part-time about 25 to 30 hours a week. It's a place to sleep and study. All I need, really. What do you want, Stella? Wait, how did you find me? You're listed in the phone book. Bullshit. The only phone I have is a cell. How did you find me? Stella paused, smiled, and said, "It was obvious that you weren't going to call me, so I tracked you down. One of my girls works in the registrar's office, and I had her check the files for your address. I repeat, what are you doing here? I wanted to see and talk to you without the entourage, as you call them. Why? It's not like we've been close for the last 5 or 6 years. We were friends a long time ago when we were both young. I don't understand your need to have a heart-to-heart with me. Remember that night at Kelly's I told you I'd only had 2 serious relationships and that something was missing? When I saw you, I realized what was missing was you." I started to say something about how idiotic that was, but she stopped me. "Wait, let me finish, please," she asked. "I told you that I wanted to change because you left me, and yes, I know that's not what happened, but that was my motivation. Shortly after I began Project Stella, I became a little more confident and realized that you hadn't left. You'd just gone on to college the same as I had. But by then I was seeing results and continued working on myself. This is the finished product, but now I'd like to get to know you again." I interrupted her by asking, "What do you see happening here, Stella? Maybe we could go out a few times. Perhaps we could get back to being friends, and maybe we could be more than friends. I don't know for sure, but I do know I want to spend some time with you." "Why? You obviously don't lack for company." "Why me? Steve, you were the only boy that asked me out back in high school. You didn't mind that I was chubby, you didn't mind that I didn't wear makeup or styled my hair or dressed funny, and you were always nice to me. You're right, I don't have any problems getting dates or whatever now, but they look at the package and not what it contains. A man would have to be total idiot not to want to spend a few evenings with this stunningly beautiful girl, unless she was a total bitch. I may not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but I'm no idiot, and she hadn't been bitchy to me, only to Kyle. The deciding factor for me was the friendship we'd had in high school. If I could discover that girl inside of this beauty, this could be interesting. I'd like to be friends again, but I do have a few conditions, I told Stella. Like what? Now she was smiling. When we get together to hang out or date or whatever, I have to be your main focus. No posse, no entourage, and no group, just us. I scrimped and saved for 2 years so I could come back to school for my master's, and I don't have a lot of extra money. So we won't be going to any five-star restaurants or over-the-top type places. Stella listened and looked at me and nodded. Before she could say anything, I continued. One more thing, the amount and number of times together will be limited. I'm here to continue my education, not be a social butterfly. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. I know I sound like a sanctimonious jerk here, making demands and setting conditions, but I'm making an investment of my time in you. Time that I could use to study and get some extra work done, so that's why all the conditions. I would love to rekindle the friendship with the girl I knew back then. I'm not sure about this new Stella. If you don't want to do this, I understand. May I ask one question? I nodded and she asked, could we go for pizza tomorrow night? We went out for pizza the next evening, and so began our quest to reconnect. Stella and I went places and did things that you would expect friends to do. We went on hikes and picnics, attended free outdoor concerts, explored the art museum, and just generally got to know each other again. It was fun and we enjoyed ourselves. A couple of evenings at Kelly's or one of the other off-campus bars, we ran into Stella's entourage. It wasn't planned, and Stella suggested we go somewhere else. It was my decision to stay and to join the group. I couldn't expect her to give up her friends entirely. I have to admit I had a good time, and contrary to my first thoughts, these people were interesting and a lot of fun. The first time we joined them, Kyle immediately jumped up to get drinks for Her Majesty and her consort. I pushed him back into his chair and asked the group if anyone wanted another drink. Kyle followed me to help carry the drinks back to the table. Kyle, what the hell are you doing? I know you'd like to be more than a friend to Stella, but she'll never give you a chance if you keep acting like a love-sick puppy. Stand up and be a man, I told him. I couldn't resist. I hated to see any guy being treated like a doormat. Don't know for sure, but I think he took my advice. I never saw him with the group again. On one of our off nights, I went to Kelly's for a burger and saw Stella dancing with a man. Her posse was sitting at a couple of tables near the dance floor. No big deal. We weren't exclusive and I couldn't expect her to sit at home breathlessly waiting for my call. But I have to admit that seeing her with another man bothered me. Maybe I'm starting to think of Stella as more than just a friend, I thought. Maybe it's time to make a decision about Stella and me. Maybe it's time to take the next step, to be more than just buddies hanging out together. But the last thing I needed was a full-blown romantic relationship, at least until I got my post-grad degree. So maybe it would be best to dial this friendship back a notch. On the other hand, I was enjoying our dates and didn't want to go back to spending all my time studying and working. Man, I was really confused. Stella saw me as they finished their dance, smiled and motioned for me to come to her table. I waved at her, smiled, and shook my head. I finished my beer, wrapped the burger to take with me, and went back to my apartment. Less than 30 minutes later, someone knocked on my door. Surprise, surprise, it was Stella. First she smiled at me, then she frowned, and then she walked past me into my apartment. Why didn't you come over and join us? Looked like you were on a date. I don't think your guy would have liked my interrupting. He wasn't my date. He's just a guy that started hanging around with us after Kyle left, she explained. Why didn't you come over? You've spent time with our group before. So good old Kyle left the group, did he? He wasn't a bad guy, and I was glad to hear that he had developed some backbone. Yeah, funny thing, he hadn't been around for 2 or 3 weeks and I ran into him at a coffee shop one day. I asked him where he'd been, and he said that he was tired of acting like a love-sick puppy. He told me if I wanted him, I knew how to get in touch with him, and walked off. Strange behavior, very strange. I had to laugh. Kyle had basically told Her Majesty Stella to shove it. Good for him, I thought. Stella saw my grin and heard the laugh and asked, did you have anything to do with Kyle leaving? I told him that you'd never respect him or go out with him if he didn't quit jumping every time you told him to. I guess he got the message. She shook her head and smiled. Now what's the real reason you didn't join us? I took a deep breath, held it for a few seconds, and let it out. Time to confess, I thought. I didn't like seeing you dance with another man. I know, I said before Stella could say anything. We are supposed to be just friends or buddies. Stella smiled again, took my hand, and led me to my sofa, pulling me down beside her. Go on, she prompted. Taking another deep breath, I continued. We never talked about being exclusive. I mean, why would we talk about it? Being just friends and all? But I think I've gone beyond that, and rather than cause a problem, I came home. She crawled onto my lap and said, I've gone beyond that friend stuff too. I was waiting for you to take the next step, but I guess I'll have to do it. Then she kissed me. So began the next step in our relationship. Now we went on dates, not just hanging out together. We were exclusive, or going steady, or whatever it's called. Stella's entourage became her friends rather than her minions, and she spent a few evenings with them when I was working or studying. Any man in the group was told bluntly that she wasn't available, so don't bother asking her out or playing up to her. The queen bee that she had been disappeared, and that person wasn't missed. Instead, I had a woman closer to the old Stella and was happy to have her back. We continued seeing and being with each other until I finished my post-grad work. The day that I finished, I asked Stella to marry me, and she accepted. We had a quickie wedding in Las Vegas over a 4-day weekend, and I started my new job. For the first 3 years, our marriage was great. We'd had discussions about what we wanted and expected from a partner and agreed on the most important things. We had already decided that children would come later along with a house, and we, or at least I, discussed fidelity. I asked that if either of us became so upset or dissatisfied with our marriage that we wanted someone else, that we be upfront about it and not become the cliché of a cheating spouse. We both agreed it would be more respectful to confront each other and part as friends. Now we had the time and income to enjoy some of the things we hadn't been able to when I was in grad school. We took weekend trips, joking that we were taking our honeymoon 3 days at a time. I'd always wanted to visit San Antonio to see the Alamo and experience the Riverwalk, so we flew there on a Friday and explored for 3 days. Stella wanted to see Hearst Castle, and on another weekend we made that trip. We were having fun and loving each other. Things began to change at the beginning of our 4th year of marriage. Her Majesty Stella was back. She was a little testy to me a few times, and she gave me orders. Not requests for me to do something, but orders to do it. I didn't say anything at first, but questioned her about it the 3rd or 4th time it happened. She apologized, using a stressful situation at work as an excuse, and promised to watch herself. Stella was back to her old self for a few days, and then it started again. The 3rd time we went through this cycle, I'd had enough. I don't know what's going on, Stella, but whatever is bothering you needs to be fixed. I'm not one of the minions you had before, and I won't be treated this way. If you've got a problem with me or with us, speak up and let's solve whatever it is. Stella apologized, cried a little, and asked me to forgive her. I did, and we spent the evening making up. I got sidetracked and didn't push to find out what the problem was and why she was acting the way she had. Then came the night at O'Toole's when she was supposed to be with her sister and instead was making out with a guy in a back booth. It was obvious that this wasn't the first time they had been together. I didn't know if it had gone farther than a make-out session or if she had been to bed with the guy, but it didn't make any difference. The first time she blatantly lied to me, the first time she passionately kissed this guy, the first time she snuck off to be with him, our marriage was over. I'd heard stories or read about what other husbands had done when confronted with a cheating wife. Some had folded up and let it break them. Some had waited getting evidence for a divorce. Some got the evidence and came up with elaborate schemes for revenge, and some just beat the hell out the guy and sometimes the cheating wife too. I did none of these. My first thought when I saw them was, oh shit. Next, why would she? And anger was the final thought. Stella was much too sharp and confident to be seduced by some slick character, so this guy was with her by invitation. Other than being a sleazeball for running with a married woman, I couldn't blame him too much. Stella was a very, very attractive woman. No, my anger, or most of it, was directed at my cheating wife. As I walked toward them, I wasn't too worried about the guy getting physical. After all, I had the moral right on my side, didn't I? Actually, the reason I wasn't worried is that I'm 6 feet 4 inches with no slack belly. Might is right. Isn't that what they say? My wayward wife and her friend didn't notice me until I slid into the booth opposite them. They broke off their kissing and fondling, and if it hadn't been my wife, the look on their faces would have been hilarious. I've heard the old saying about someone's face going white with shock, but I'd never seen it until now. Stella's mouth was opening and closing like the proverbial fish out of water. It was funny as hell. Or it would have been if it wasn't Stella sitting there. I didn't know your sister got a sex change operation, Stella, I said in all seriousness. Maybe that's why her fiancé broke up with her. Stella's reaction was cliché. I heard, oh my God, what are you doing here? It's not what it looks like. It's not what you think, and so on. Her friend decided that it might be a good idea to leave and started to slide out of the booth. I grabbed his arm and stopped him from leaving. You better stick around, friend. Stella's going to need a place to stay, and when I leave you can take her with you. No, I'll come home with you, Steve. We can talk and I can explain all this, Stella said. Stella, you don't have a home. You lost it the minute you hooked up with shithead here. Don't come home, don't call, and don't try to see me. I'll have my attorney contact you at work to get your attorney's name, and we'll let them do their job, I replied. Give me your wallet. This to the man sitting across from me. He hesitated and I said, don't make me take it off you after I knock you out. You've got a free ride here because you wouldn't be here if she didn't want you here, so don't get stupid. He handed me his wallet. I took his driver's license and handed his wallet back to him. That's so I'll know who to subpoena if need be, Jerry. You can apply for a replacement license pretty easily. I looked at the two of them and continued. Stella, this is a no-fault state, so we'll just split everything down the middle. You can keep the apartment if you want. Don't fight this and it'll be over quickly. Good old Jerry started mumbling to Stella something about his wife and family. You two a-holes deserve each other. Have a good night, I said, sliding out of the booth, and went home to pack. Of course, my cell phone started ringing right away. Not tonight, Stella. Not tonight, I thought. If someone had known what was going on and watched me when I confronted Stella, they would have thought what a cold-hearted scumsucker I was. He doesn't really care about his wife. The truth was my heart was broken. I'd lost the girl from high school, found her again and been happy, and now I'd lost her again. On the way home, I decided that I wasn't going to go the way of some husbands in my position. I wasn't going to turn into a drunk or wallow in self-pity. When you sobered up or overcame the self-pity, your problems were still there, waiting to bite you in the butt. The only way to handle problems was to face them and kick their butt. The phone was ringing as I got back to our apartment, and the caller ID showed it was Stella's sister. I had calmed down a little, so I answered it, thinking it was Stella. It was her sister, Betty. What's going on, Steve? Stella just got here and she is a mess. She's crying and babbling about she didn't mean it, Betty said. I walked in on your sister and her boyfriend tonight and told her we were done. I told her not to come home, so I guess she went to your place. Boyfriend? What boyfriend? What did you think you saw? There has to be some mistake, Steve. The mistake was made by Stella. Tell her I'll be out of the apartment by tomorrow evening, and she can come back then. Goodbye, Betty. Steve, wait, what? I hung up on her, muted the volume on the phone and answering machine so the calls that would be coming in wouldn't bother me. My cell started to ring almost immediately, so I turned it off too. I packed up most of my clothes and personal things like my computer. Tomorrow I would find a motel for a few days until I could find another apartment. The next morning, I saw about 12 messages on the machine and another 15 or 20 in the voicemail on my cell. I listened to each one long enough to know that it was Stella or Betty and deleted them. The only message I answered was from my dad. His call I returned. What the hell's going on, Steve? He asked when I called him. Stella called several times wanting to talk to you or wanting me to call you for her. I caught her with some guy in a bar, of all places, making out. Guess she didn't like it when I told her not to come home. Maybe she just made a mistake. Maybe she didn't sleep with him. Why don't you talk to her and let her explain? I'd hate to see you guys break up. Dad, it doesn't make any difference if she had sex with him. She lied to me so she could meet this guy. You should talk to at least, don't you think? Okay, Pop, I'll talk to her just to get her to leave you alone. But we're done no matter what she says, I replied. That afternoon, I called Betty's place and asked to speak to Stella. She came on the line and immediately started with, I'm sorry, I didn't sleep with him. It didn't mean anything and more bull until I stopped her. Stella, listen to me. Stop crying and listen. When we got married, we agreed that if things got bad between us, we'd walk away instead of disrespecting each other. For whatever reason, you decided you didn't want to do that and became the ultimate cliche, a cheating wife. But I didn't sleep with him, Steve. It was only some harmless flirting. It didn't mean anything, and I... Stop. It meant something to me, Stella. It showed a lack of respect for me. It showed that you don't love me, at least not the way I thought. And it showed me it was time to get out. Let's meet and talk and I can explain why and what really happened, Stella pleaded with me. You're not listening. I don't give a damn why. Just that you did. I don't care what really happened, as you say. The lies and deceit are enough for me. The screwing around just put the icing on it. Don't call me and quit calling my dad. Do us both a favor and just sign the papers when you get them. Make it as easy as possible. Goodbye, Stella. The divorce went through and was finalized in just 3 months. Stella didn't object or fight the splitting of assets, so it was pretty cut and dried. She did ask to meet with me before signing the papers, but I refused. There was nothing she could say or explain, or any way she could put a spin on her actions that would make me feel any different. After moving out of our apartment, I found a very nice first-floor studio apartment. It was just me. I wasn't looking for any commitments, so it was big enough. I'd rather spend the money on toys than on a bigger place to live. I waited until I was legally divorced before I started going out or dating. O'Toole's and Kelly's were no longer my first options because of Stella, so I had to find a new watering hole. I found a place called Connor's Pub and Grill that was perfect. They poured an honest drink, served good basic food, and the service was outstanding. The people there made you feel welcomed and at home. It was a good place to hang out. I started going there to eat on Friday evenings. The owner, or at least one of them, was Jake Connor. He was a big guy like me, and we sort of hit it off. I told my sad tale. He said he'd been there, done that, and had the damn t-shirt. Jake handed me a beer on the house and told me that sometimes you have to wade through the bitches of the world to find a good woman. After about 6 months or so, I finally decided that I wouldn't let my history with Stella stop me from going wherever I wanted. So I went to Kelly's with a couple of guys from work a few times, and sometimes Stella was there. The entourage was back in full force. This time she had 2 guys step in and fetch in for her. Her Majesty Stella had returned. Surprisingly, it didn't bother me all that much, but it was good to see the look on her face whenever I left with a woman. One such woman was Julie Wilson. I sort of had a steady thing with her. After the first time we met at Kelly's, she would call every 2 to 3 weeks and want to get together. Being a macho-type guy, I'd always thought I knew pretty much what to do and how to do it in bed, sexually speaking, I mean. Compared to Julie, I was a freshman just beginning to learn, and she was the professor. We did things to and for each other that I'd only read about or seen in adult movies. I noticed something strange, though. When Julie and I got together, most of the time she had to leave by midnight, but about every 6 weeks she would stay all night with me. I didn't understand, but I wasn't complaining. I don't know if I would have survived if she spent every night with me. All good things must come to an end, or so the old adage goes. This good thing came to a screeching halt one evening as Julie was getting ready to leave. It was earlier than normal, about 9 p.m., and I was trying to talk her into at least one more go-around. "Can't do it, honey. Got to meet Jack at 10:30 at the Lamplighter," she said as she laughingly pulled away from me. "I've got to get home and get cleaned up before I meet him. Have I been replaced?" I joked. "Who's this Jack that's beating my time?" "Jack's my husband, silly." Then she saw the shocked look on my face. "I thought you knew I was married and we were just having a little fun." "How would I know? You never said anything or even mentioned a husband." I responded with more than a little anger. No wonder she wouldn't give me her phone number or tell me where she worked or lived. She didn't want me to throw a wrench into her little escapades. Oops, my bad. "Well, don't worry, honey. He'll be gone on his every 6-week trip next week, and I can spend the whole night with you." "I'll call you next week, baby," she said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. I felt like an a-hole. I was doing the same thing to this Jack, and that jerk had done to me with Stella. Damn. I felt stupid and used, and then I felt mad. Jack Wilson was probably a decent guy, working his butt off to provide for his wife, and she was screwing anything that walked. I knew I wasn't her only bed partner, but before I found out she was married, I didn't care. It wasn't morals or scruples, or any high-sounding philosophy that made me do what I did. It was pure anger, and I thought for once somebody was going to get some payback. I took a quick shower, looked up the address of the Lamplighter, and went to find Jack Wilson. So here I am lying flat on my back on the barroom floor, wondering if Jack Wilson is going to start kicking me. "Look, Mr. Wilson, Jack, I owed you that one and maybe another one. So I'm going to get up, and if you feel you have to, I'll take another shot. But after that one, I'll protect myself," I told him. I stood up, really expecting his to knock me down again, but he stood there looking at me with hate in his eyes. I pointed to the bar stools, and we both sat down. The bartender had the phone in his hand, calling the cops, I guess, and I motioned for him to put it down, telling him everything was cool. Ordering 2 of what Jack was drinking, I told him my story. "I swear, Jack, I didn't know she was married until tonight. If I had, I would have never started up with her." He looked like he didn't believe me, so I gave him a short version of Stella and me. I always felt she didn't get punished, but then all I wanted was out. I wasn't into the revenge thing. I could tell his eyes that now he believed me. "Here's my card. If you decide to divorce her or whatever, call me if you want me to testify or give a statement for you," I offered. He nodded and put the card in his wallet. I motioned for another drink for him and stood to leave. "One more thing you need to know before you make a decision, Jack. I'm not the only one. She calls me every 2 to 3 weeks to get together, and I don't think she's just sitting at home the rest of the time. Good luck, Jack. You deserve better than this." "Wait, Steve. Would you hang around and confront her when she gets here? I'd like to see her reaction to your being here." I nodded and went to a booth in the back that you couldn't see from Jack's seat or from the front door. This is going to be fun. Well, maybe interesting is a better word, I thought. Julie came breezing in about 10 minutes later. She walked over to Jack saying, "Hi, honey. Gosh, I've missed you." She gave him a hug and kiss. "Order me a drink, please. I've got to use the ladies' room." Off she went to the bathroom. When she came back, Jack had moved, and she took his seat with her back to my booth. After a couple of minutes, Jack lifted his hand and sort of motioned for me to come over. Walking up behind Julie, I said, "Hi, Julie. Can I buy you and your friend a drink?" She turned around, saw me, then turned back to look at Jack, then back at me and fainted. I nodded at Jack and left. 3 months later, I got a call from Jack Wilson. He said he wanted to fill me in on what happened between him and Julie. Jack said that he let her talk him into going to a marriage counselor, and for 1 month solid, twice a week, Julie tried to shift the blame to him. He traveled too much. She got lonely. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. He told me he chalked it up to a bad move when the therapist began to agree with Julie. He told them both to go to hell and filed for divorce. Apparently, Julie didn't want her activities to become public knowledge, so she didn't contest the divorce. He would be a free man in another month or so. I said, Jack, don't let it get you down. You'll come through. As a friend of mine once told me, life goes on. The trick is to go with it. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I vividly remember the day I left my hometown. It was a crisp autumn morning, and the air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves. I packed everything I valued into my old pickup truck, determined to start fresh, far from the painful memories. Leaving wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Betrayal and deceit had ruined my life, and the only way to heal was to distance myself from those who hurt me. After hours of driving, I found a quaint, sleepy town that seemed perfect for a new beginning. The locals were friendly, the pace was slow, and the town had a charming appeal. I discovered a small, rundown gas station and garage that had been on the market for years. Seeing its potential, I made a low offer, which was surprisingly accepted. This property became the foundation for rebuilding my life and business. One Saturday afternoon, I sat quietly in my favorite tavern, enjoying the peace. This tavern became my sanctuary shortly after moving here. I bought the local gas station and repair shop at a bargain price, seeing its untapped potential. The previous owner was eager to sell after it sat on the market for 2 years. It was the perfect place for a fresh start, helping me leave my past behind. The first thing I did was build a large retail store facing the gas station to supply the town after the only grocery store closed at 7 p.m. I moved the tanks so the pumps were visible from the store, which left plenty of parking spaces for customers. The store was busiest from 7 p.m. to midnight and was open 24/7. The garage at the back of the lot was open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., 5 days a week, with special projects on Saturdays. Although the bar was initially upset when we started selling basic liquor, it eventually provided a good income and created needed jobs in the community. The business became very successful after restructuring the store's internal merchandising, thanks to a woman I hired. It quickly repaid the equity loan and required doubling the staff due to high demand. On Friday and Saturday nights, we sold lots of junk food to bar patrons, and on Sundays, we sold plenty of cold beer at reasonable prices. I was sipping a double shot of Jack Daniels with ice water and lemon, having just finished replacing the steering column in an old truck, a family heirloom. It took me 8 months to find the part and fabricate some fixtures. His family had driven this truck since the 40s, and he had no plans to stop. If he could, he would be buried in it. 4 to 7 was the best time at the bar since most regulars had already had dinner. In a couple of hours, the place would be filled with a musical crowd. Farmers brought their daughters for after-work fun. In my 6.5 years here, I built a solid reputation and made many friends. The locals looked out for each other and kept me informed of anything unusual. I came to the bar once a week, always on Saturdays, for a drink before heading home. It was my quiet time to gather my thoughts. I saw them walk in and wished I hadn't. They ruined a perfect day. The woman was my ex's twin sister, and the young man with her was once my son. It brought back memories I didn't want. I realized you can't see evil when you live with it. The boy had grown up and looked more like his biological father. This proved the truth always comes out. Why were they looking for me now? They chatted with the bartender, showed him a picture, and then left. I was grateful for my long, unkempt hair, beard, and mustache, which made me look different, especially since I had lost weight. No one noticed the message I sent, which simply said, "Come home when I can." About a half hour later, the bartender came over and sat at my table. "What did they want, Tom?" I asked. "They wanted to give you a message. They heard a rumor you live here and came to check it out," Tom replied. "They said a woman named Willa is dying of cancer and wants to make peace." I asked for your picture, pretending not to recognize your name. "Who are they? And what do they want?" I took out a cigarette, ripped off the filter, and lit it. "The woman is my ex-wife's twin sister. The young man is my ex-wife's illegitimate son, whom she passed off as mine for years. Based on your experience, do you think they were telling the truth?" I asked. "From their body language, I'd say they're partly honest, but hiding something big," Tom replied. I nodded. My ex-wife and her sister had always been deceptive, appearing genuine while betraying me. Tom went back behind the bar. My thoughts drifted to nearly 7 years ago when I left, promising not to return for another 7 years. They laughed at me, thinking I was a fool. They learned a hard lesson that day because they never saw or heard from me directly again. They didn't believe how serious or hurt I was. They thought I was just mad at their joke. They had no idea that a few weeks earlier I discovered our youngest child was my brother-in-law's son. That revelation started my journey to this moment. A family member who had seen Willa and Tammy, the evil twins, betray me too often, provided the proof. She called them black witches practicing pure evil. Earlier that week, before I left, we discovered a new insurance policy on me with double indemnity for accidental pass away, totaling $4 million if I died. A wise old woman told me to flee. When I left for my work truck, they had no clue. It was already packed with everything I wanted from my 16-year marriage. I drove away without looking back and ended up 2 states away. Part of this was my fault since I got Willa pregnant when she was 16 and I was 18. My family convinced me to marry her, and soon we had 2 more kids. They thought it was hilarious. Willa told our daughters, "Your father will come back when he cools off. He needs to regain his sense of humor." A few hours later, a sheriff's car arrived at the house. Willa greeted him at the door. "Are you Mrs. Willa Racine?" he asked. When she said yes, he replied, "Mom, you've just been served." She laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when she opened the envelope, she realized I had dissolved our marriage without a second thought. The Grand Dame told me she was shocked. My attorney listed all our assets and liabilities, including a DNA report showing the affair lasted a year. The divorce petition included details, receipts, and photos from their hotel meetings. In the envelope was a letter revealing I was suing her husband for child support, infidelity, and defamation. Their laughter stopped. The joke was no longer on me. I had the last laugh. Their joke was that I was only good for making money. Everything I touched seemed to turn to gold, so Willa and the kids were spoiled and never needed anything. Later, Willa found out I had sold 3 of our businesses, paid off all debt, and sold our 2 apartment buildings for a profit. I canceled all credit cards, removed my name from bank accounts, and signed over my half of the house to her. I took half our worth in cash, reducing our cash flow from $10,000 a month to 0. Willa's sister learned the cost of using me. My attorney froze their assets before they got the subpoena, leaving them broke after the divorce. My attorney called Willa in after the divorce and reimbursed her for a quarter of their losses. "Why would he do that?" she asked. My lawyer replied, "For him, it was never about the money. It was about principle. He hopes this money gives you a chance to start over and learn from your experience." Willa refused to agree to the divorce without speaking to me, leaving us legally separated but not divorced. I had no need to talk to someone who lied to me for years. She had to work for the first time, learning that money disappears quickly without income. I had my attorney forward important mail to a rented FedEx mailbox, which was then sent to my work address weekly. I did this knowing that Willa and her sister loved to manipulate and plan revenge. I knew they would eventually try to get back at me. It wasn't a question of if, but when. Their family didn't believe in leaving things be, and my absence would upset them. The longer this went on, the worse their payback would be. They wouldn't let it go easily. Until now, I thought I had succeeded in escaping. With Tammy's appearance, I realized their game wasn't over. I finished my drink and left through the back door, in case they were watching the front. I crossed the empty lot behind the house and walked around the block to my pickup. As I was unlocking the door, a man approached and said, "You're a hard man to find, mister." "Arthur, Seth Racine, no doubt," I said. "How do you know that? My name is Peter Edwards." "Your oldest daughter, Connie, is my wife," he replied. "That could be a blessing or a curse," I said, "if she acts like her mother, so why are you here?" "I came looking for you," he said. "Some things need to be settled." "That would be the case if your mother-in-law would just sign the divorce agreement," I said. "What divorce agreement?" Peter asked in surprise. I told him to follow me. We drove through town, then onto a long driveway leading to a farmhouse. Inside my home office, I showed him the divorce papers and let him make copies. Peter didn't need to know that I didn't live there. I had built it for the Grand Dame, hoping she would eventually leave her old home. Peter was a pleasant-looking, confident, and seemingly educated young man. I wondered if he was who he claimed or part of Willa and Tammy's scheme. He used my Wi-Fi to download files onto his laptop. All important records were stored there, with a master copy in a safety deposit box. He was interested in a copy of the sheriff's report Willa signed when served with the summons. He managed to print a damaging letter from Willa's attorney to mine, acknowledging the agreed property division, but refusing to finalize the divorce without my in-person meeting. While Peter worked, I observed his expressions and saw that he was learning new information. My paperwork contradicted what he believed. "Do you think Connie knows?" Peter asked. That's something you'll have to find out, I replied. Here's a question for you. Is Willa really dying of cancer? Who told you that? Peter asked. Tammy and Seth told a bartender that today. But I know Willa is fine. She's in a common law marriage with her former lawyer and is expecting his second child. Peter said, She's the one who asked me to find you to start the divorce. She claims it's necessary so she can remarry. He called his wife and put it on speakerphone so I could hear. Connie, did you know your mother lied about the divorce not being finalized? Peter asked. What are you talking about? Connie replied. Mom told us Dad abandoned us and cleaned out whatever was left before leaving town. If it wasn't for our stepfather, we wouldn't have survived. I'm sending you the legal file, said Peter. Read it and contact me as soon as possible. While they talked, I grabbed 2 bottles of Bud, opened them, and put one in front of him. Why didn't you tell my daughter you found me? I asked. Connie and I have only been married 2 years, and we just had a son 3 months ago. For now, I'm not going to tell anyone I found you, Peter said. Everyone thinks I'm investigating a case. He showed me his badge, confirming he was a police officer for the Paradise Police Department. I checked the department's webpage on my laptop, proving he was telling the truth. It was the accident report from a few months ago that led me to you, Peter explained. Connie wrote a report on your disappearance, which was forwarded to the wanted list. The insurance company informed me of the ruling in your favor. So why didn't you tell Connie you found me? I asked again. After reviewing your file, it became clear something else might be going on, Peter said. I wondered what happened to the $250,000 cash Willa was supposed to get along with the house deed. And why are they all lying about what really happened? Yeah, sounds like I've been fed lies too, I said as his phone rang. It's my wife. I'll put it on speaker, Peter said. Please keep it down. Hi, honey, Connie said. Where did you get all this from? Is it true? We've been lied to for years. Seth doesn't know his origins, and neither do I. My sister Karen will be shocked. Mom chastised her for defending Dad. They don't speak anymore. This story contradicts everything we've been told. Mom and Auntie gave Dad no choice. They've been manipulating his life for years. What bothers me is that the divorce isn't finalized because Mom won't sign it. What's really going on? It's true. I got the information from your father's lawyer's widow. I had to go out of state to find her. Her husband kept duplicates of all his records. From the paperwork, it looks like your mother was served with a divorce petition the same day he left, Peter said. I wrote a note for Connie to talk to her great-aunt Josie if she was still alive. Peter nodded. Pete, it's crucial to find my father now, Connie said. He deserves to be free of Mom and her schemes, at least to finalize the divorce. What happened to the money she got? Why did she have to sell the house if it was hers? The more I look into this, the more I wonder what's going on and why she planned to sue him for desertion as soon as she found him. Ask my sister to watch our son a bit longer, and you talk to Aunt Josie about what we found. Maybe she'll open up, Peter said. This must stay between us for now. It looks like there may be serious fraud. Why has your mother been slandering your father for years? I'll need to talk to the district attorney. The $250,000 cash disappeared once it reached your father's lawyer. Don't tell your sister yet. If the DA investigates, it's best no one else knows. I got up to get us some servings, giving Peter privacy until he finished his call. Why do you want Connie to talk to Aunt Josie? Peter asked. Josie gathered all the information about Willa and George's affair, I said. She never married but watched over the family like a mother, raising her only daughter. Being a single mom changed her perspective. She thought Tammy and Willa conspired and used George and me, but their ultimate goal is unclear. If it's true, why? Peter asked. Aunt Josie's granddaughter Jody wants her to move in with her, but Josie insists on waiting until the truth comes out. Jody visits with her 2 sons. Jody leads a very withdrawn life, I said. Socializing with Willa and Tammy takes a toll on everyone. They've used people most of their lives. It wasn't until Josie gave me the material that I realized this. Do you want to ask me about your children before I leave? Peter asked. Not until I know you're who you say you are, I replied. This could be another part of their game. Look into the sudden pass away of my lawyer, because if she's planning to sue me, what makes her think she can win? Peter's face turned white, realizing what kind of people he had married. We decided to trust each other enough to exchange numbers. He promised to keep me informed. I walked him to the door, shook his hand, and said goodbye. After he left, I cleaned up, locked the apartment, and took the long way home to ensure I wasn't followed, giving me time to think. My life had improved since putting the past behind me. Did I want to relive it all again? Knowing Willa and Tammy, I had to prepare for what was coming, as they'd go to any length for money. As soon as I walked through the door, two little kids grabbed my legs. I picked up my 3- and 4-year-olds, the apples of my eye, just like their mother. I felt blessed to have all 3 of them in my life. My wife, Jody, called out that dinner was almost ready, so I went to wash up. Over dinner, I told her about my day since closing the store. I couldn't have imagined my life turning out like this when I left Paradise almost 7 years ago. I promised my grandmother, Josie, that I would keep in touch, and I did, calling her every Sunday. About 1.25 years ago, she called me for help. Her granddaughter, Jody, needed to escape a failed marriage and find a safe place to start over. Jody, 10 years younger than me, had no children and lived on an army base out of state. I didn't know much about her, but I owed Josie and was glad to help. It took me a week to find and partially furnish a 2-bedroom apartment for her in a small town, which was nearly impossible without a friend's help. When I arrived to pick up Jody, she had quit her job, emptied her bank accounts, and packed her bags. Her husband was about to enlist in the Army after his last 2-week training exercise. I quietly arrived around 8 in the evening with a rented U-Haul truck. With the help of a few neighbors and friends, we moved everything she wanted into the truck. I left her town in under 4 hours, refusing to say where I was from for safety. As we drove back, Jody and I started to get to know each other. Late that night, she got a call from her grandmother. I smiled when she said, "Yes, Grandma, Art picked me up. You could have warned me he's a wild bushman who might look half decent if he cleaned up." The next day, Josie contacted Jody's attorney to have all her legal documents sent to my FedEx box. Jody warned that her soon-to-be ex-husband could cause trouble, so I took steps to protect her. Jody then took over managing my store and proved to be an excellent manager, making successful changes and prioritizing customer needs. Her personality attracted many new clients, and she established a well-organized, problem-free staff. Josie had to get a restraining order against Jody's ex due to his constant threats. He was dishonorably discharged and moved back to my old hometown, thinking Jody would be there. To keep unwanted attention at bay, Jody wore a diamond ring, which helped her adjust to her new life. She handled banking and bookkeeping, gaining everyone's acceptance as I had introduced her. Jody's honesty and personality made her wonderful, and her long black hair was often hidden from her face. When asked about her ring, she replied, "I'm sure you'll figure it out," sparking rumors that she was my future mail-order bride. She started bringing me lunch on Saturdays, as I often forgot to eat while working, resulting in weight loss. Our relationship grew naturally. Everyone assumed we were a couple, and Josie kept us updated on events back home. We became curious when we learned Jody's ex was friendly with Tammy. The day Jody's divorce was finalized, our relationship deepened. We celebrated with friends at the local bar, sharing our first kiss during a slow dance under dim lights. 6 months later, we moved in together. While the kids were bathing, I shaved off my beard and mustache, leaving only stubble. The kids watched in amazement. I soaped my face and theirs with the bowl and brush Jody bought me for Christmas, much to their delight. Jody walked in, surprised to see the kids giggling with soapy faces as I finished shaving. "It looks like Daddy would look like you with a clean face," Jody teased. "Should I cut his hair too?" Both toddlers eagerly said, "Yes." I laughed and said, "I'll let the barber handle that on Monday." "No, I'll do it myself before you change your mind," Jody insisted. After drying off the kids and getting them dressed for bed, they sat at the kitchen table and watched Jody cut my hair. By the time she finished, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I told Jody she did a great job. She sent me to shower off the loose hair while she cleaned up. During this, her grandmother called to say Connie had just left. Jody believed her grandmother was ready to confront the family, straightening things out. Connie learned that my 3 children were supposed to receive $600 each per month from annuities I had set up for child support, but they hadn't received any of it. The next week, I endured jokes from everyone about my new look. People asked Jody if she had to blackmail me into joining normal society. Jody humorously replied that I had promised to bathe at least 3 times a week. Most got the joke, some didn't. It was interesting to see how people acted when they believed they were superior. Bird of Paradise informed me that I would be sued in civil court for child abandonment, desertion, and back child support. Jody and I found this amusing, thinking a judgment would lead to a collection service trying to find me. When the mailman broke the news, he also found it funny. His boss and the DA hired an attorney to represent me, using my situation to piece things together. Peter estimated that Willa and Tammy had stolen over $48,000 from each of our children. They re-examined my former attorney's sudden pass away, turning it into an open criminal case. Jody's ex-husband became a person of interest. If the findings were true, Willa and Tammy faced 7 to 10 years in prison, and Willa's former attorney, now her common-law husband, could be disbarred. The lawyer they hired for me would be paid by them, and I needed to stay hidden to help build a stronger case. We had a few weeks of peace. Then Josie called Sunday night, informing us that paperwork would be filed on Monday. She emailed me everything she had collected over 7 years, including notarized statements, videotaped conversations, and names of attorneys for a countersuit. A $2 million accident insurance policy caught my eye, explaining some missing money. Jody found out it had been purchased 6 months before I left. We spent half the night forwarding information to the DA, certain this was a setup to lure me back. The next morning, Jody called the recommended attorneys and picked one, sending them everything along with a retainer. As soon as Willa's team filed the lawsuit, I would serve them before receiving it. On Friday morning, Jody called me. Josie was on her way with guests, having left Thursday night and stayed overnight at a hotel. This indicated things were heating up. Jody and I decided to close the store on Saturday and have a long weekend with family. Peter was riding with Connie and their son. All Connie knew was that they were visiting Jody. Around 7 p.m., we saw a Ford Explorer and Escape pull up in the driveway. 4 adults got out of the cars. Jody noticed my concern and took my hand. My truck was hidden in the garage, so no one knew I was there. "Who's that with Josie?" Jody asked. "That's Peter, his wife Connie holding their baby, and Karen, my second oldest," I replied. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. Jody, holding our youngest, opened the front door. We all came out to greet our guests. Karen burst into tears upon seeing me. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and hugged Karen tightly. Connie handed her son to Peter and joined us. My daughters had grown into lovely ladies, and seeing them together was unforgettable. "Good to see you again, Peter," I said, shaking his hand. After introductions, Jody served a huge dinner. Beef shoulder, mashed potatoes, gravy, scones, Yorkshire pudding, string beans, and hot apple pie for dessert. After the kids settled, we started discussing everything. "First of all, Art, is it okay if I call you Dad?" Peter asked. I nodded. "Then, Dad, the DA believes Jody's ex's car was involved in your lawyer's accident. We're doing a paint comparison with the current owner's car. If it matches, he'll be charged with manslaughter," Peter explained. "The fire that destroyed his office the same night was treated as arson. He was seen in the background on video. Since Willa and her attorney sealed the divorce papers, they think there are no documents to prove what happened. They filed a lawsuit against you this week." Jody looked at me and burst into tears. "I always thought you were overprotective when you moved me here, but now I see you weren't. I thought your questions to my grandmother were excessive, but now I realize you needed to understand who we were dealing with before making a plan." "Willa and Tammy received your lawsuit on Thursday," Josie said. "They must have realized I was communicating with you. We feared they'd start tormenting me, so we came here quickly." "Grandma, we got your house ready," Jody said. "It's furnished, so you just need clothes." "I brought most of it in the car," Josie said. "Connie will ship the rest, including antiques. I gave her power of attorney to sell the house and furniture. It was time to leave paradise. I'll drive back with Peter and Connie and rent a truck to haul everything out," I said. "It's time to see if our suspicions are correct." "What suspicions?" asked Peter. "The lawsuit against me is a ploy to lure me out," I said. "With $2 million in accidental pass-away insurance, it's clear my former attorney's pass-away was a test." Peter, Connie, Karen, and Josie's faces turned white as they realized the truth. "They were planning your pass-away, Dad," Connie said. "You knew it before you left town." "I had a good idea at the time, but even my lawyer didn't believe me," I replied with a broad smile. He experienced firsthand that I was right. Peter excused himself to make important calls. This gave my daughters, my wife, and me time to catch up. Jody found pictures of me from when we first met. Both daughters admitted they wouldn't have recognized me. When Peter returned, everyone fell silent. "Willa will be taken into custody after the holiday," Peter said. "We can hold her for 48 hours before charging her with 3 counts of theft for stealing annuities from her children." "We'll slow down the process so she won't get a bond hearing immediately," Peter explained. "Dad, if you can fly in on Wednesday, rent a U-Haul and visit some old places to get noticed. Tell anyone who asks that you're here to pack Josie's things. This way, Willa will have to communicate from jail. The district attorney confirmed your suspicions were right. We'll have police protection for you at Josie's house until everything is resolved. Peter, are you using my children's father as bait to lure out my cousins? Jody asked. What assurance do I have that he won't become a sufferer? I looked at Jody, and she saw my determination. Damn, you'll do it without hesitation, no matter what I think, she said. Jody knew me better than I knew myself. Jody, Art has always been like that. That's why I called him to save you from your ex, Josie said. Art never asks anyone to do what he wouldn't do himself. He wants to rid us of those witches for good. My only fear is Art going back into danger, Jody replied, smiling. If Art were a boxer, he'd be a world title holder, Josie said. He's fast on his feet and can outthink them. Willa and Tammy have no idea he knows anything. Ladies, relax. I'll be in Peter's hands, I said. If anything happens to me, remember he'll have to answer to Connie, my daughter. Peter just nodded, knowing the risks of my return to paradise. Later, while the women were deep in conversation, Peter and I talked. The DA thinks Jody's ex will make his move once he knows you're in town. He'll be furious knowing you rescued Jody from her terrible marriage, Peter said. Willa will learn you're here from a planted informant in the city jail early Thursday morning. If he's caught in the act, will he spill everything to save himself? I asked. Based on his military background, he's always admitted responsibility when caught. He's a follower, not a leader, so I expect him to give up easily. He sticks with Willa and Tammy because he's easily manipulated, Peter replied. The sign read, Welcome to City of Refuge, population 34,823. It confirmed that the city council had declared the laws of the United States didn't apply here. It was like the Wild West, with justice depending on what the local authorities decided. Law-abiding citizens were prosecuted, while illegals were ignored, reflecting a skewed version of progressivism. The working class paid for the sins of others to please those in power who wanted lower wages and cheaper labor. Many actions were taken to provide that opportunity, requiring those in power to look the other way. Not much had changed here in almost 7 years. Aside from the freshly paved main street, everything looked the same. I decided my first stop should be my old favorite place, if it still existed. Thankfully, Bob and Betty's Burger Bar was still around, looking the same but freshly painted. I pulled into the parking lot, got out of the U-Haul truck, and headed for the main entrance at 11:15, just before the weekday lunch crowd. I was counting on being recognized since I was a businessman in a former life. We wanted everyone to know I was back. As I took a seat and picked up my menu, I noticed several people looking at me and using their cell phones. A server brought my coffee and creamer and asked if I was ready to order. Is Wednesday's special of meatloaf, baked beans, and garlic mashed potatoes available? I asked. How do you know about that? The server inquired. It's for regular customers and not advertised. Tell Jack that Art wants brown gravy and fried onions with the meatloaf, I said. The waitress looked at me like I was crazy. I stood up and said, Never mind, I'll tell him myself. I walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen, with the server following and shouting my order. Jack turned and looked at me. You dumbass, Jack said with a smirk. You're a few weeks early. Welcome back, old friend. Susan, bring Art's coffee over here so we can catch up while he eats. Jack, the son of the original owner, never changed the name. We'd been friends most of our lives. We chatted until just before rush hour. He asked a staff member to get his wife to join us, giving us a chance to talk about important things. Art, you should know that after you left, the wife ended her friendship with Willa and Tammy for good. She didn't like what they did or said about you and the kids. Jack, a few things are about to happen. Last night, there was supposed to be an arrest that, if things go right, will trigger several events like a row of dominoes, I explained. Connie's husband Peter works with me. That's why I came back early. Jack looked at me seriously and said, He's a damn good cop and an honest man. He put 2 of our former city council members in jail last year for corruption. You'll have to tell me more later. There are too many big ears here. We saw Sasha pull into the parking lot. She looked good. I sat down and waited for her to come in, knowing she'd see me from behind and not suspect anything was wrong. Jack, what happened? Susan asked. It was important, Sasha said. When she saw me, I stood up and turned to her. Sasha, my little sister, had lost her temper. Her older, meaner brother was home. I hugged her tightly like it was just yesterday. It took her a few minutes to calm down. Jack asked the kitchen staff to leave us alone for a few minutes. Do Mom and Dad know you're back? Sasha asked. No, and it's best if we keep it a secret for a few days, I replied. Are you here because Willa was taken into custody last night? my sister asked. Yes, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, I said. Once I settle in, I'll be under police protection. The police are now looking at my former lawyer's pass away with new eyes, believing it's connected to the arson attack on his office. Jack and Sasha's expressions spoke for themselves. It was well known that the district attorney, appointed 3 years ago, was trying to resolve many unsolved cases. You're a decoy to draw someone out, Jack said quietly. If this is correct, the arson, liquidation, and several other crimes will be solved in the next few days, I replied. This was all done to force me back to the city. Willa's arrest and my sudden return will disrupt a carefully planned conspiracy. What's behind all this? Jack asked. A $2 million insurance policy with double indemnity on accidental pass away, I said. Insured on me. My sister said, as we walked out of the restaurant to my rental truck. We were chatting when we noticed Tammy pulling up beside us. Where are you staying? My sister whispered. At the Grand Dame's house. I'll be moving her stuff to the new house, I said. She wanted to be away from whatever was about to happen. Josie left town. Why? Sasha asked. She wants to be near her granddaughter and our 2 sons, I answered with a smile. Jody and I have been together for over 5 years. We have 2 boys who recently turned 3 and 4. My sister was in complete shock. How did you and Jody end up together? Josie and I stayed in touch the whole time, I explained. When Jody needed help leaving a failed marriage, her grandmother called me. I moved her to my place. We believe her ex caused my lawyer's pass away and the fire at his office. Do Tammy and Willa know you're aware of what's happening? Asked Sasha. No, but they'll find out soon enough when they start making their moves, I replied as Tammy approached us. Art, I need you to drop part of your lawsuit against us, Tammy said. The district attorney will charge Willa within 48 hours. Unfortunately, my attorney says we can't do that because Willa filed a new divorce petition claiming desertion, abandonment of the child, and back child support, I said. Until the court rules on her claims, everything has to stay as it is. You can't say that. How will we bail her out with no assets? Tammy asked. You have a court order freezing everything? Maybe your father could help by putting up his house as collateral, I suggested. After all, you're both his daughters. Tammy turned and walked away, disappointed. Willa and Tammy's father has nothing to do with them, Sasha said. Not since he found out about Seth's true origins. He says they turned out just as bad as their mother. That brought a smile to my face. Finished with that, I got in the U-Haul and drove toward Josie's house, stopping to pick up packing materials. 3 hours later, I was backing into Josie's driveway. Using the large mirror, I parked close to the garage door. Once outside, I locked up before entering the house. I checked to make sure nothing had been touched inside. Josie said she left the curtains open, but they were closed. I texted Peter to ask if he had closed them. He replied that police officers in the house might have done it. Knowing this, I unlocked the front door and went inside. Mr. Racine, the officer said, holding out a cell phone. Peter Edwards wants to speak with you. Hi, Peter, I said. Looks like those who need to know. No. Tammy talked to me at the burger place after I finished my long lunch. She wanted me to lift the lien on her sister's assets, and I refused. I heard that, Peter said. We taped Willa and Tammy discussing their plans. Jody's ex, Brad Press, came up a lot. Willa told Tammy to let him know that you know where Jody is. That should motivate him to do what we need. Our hunch was right because Brad showed up not an hour later. Willa told him where you were staying. Our informant, who was arrested today, told her you were back to move Josie, Peter said. When Brad asked where, Willa said to her granddaughter, Jody's house. A few minutes later, I saw the garage door open. Climbing into the van, I pulled out bundles of cardboard boxes and started packing up the house. At 6:30 p.m., the pizza from Papa John's arrived. When the delivery driver knocked, I opened the door. He asked if I was moving. I said no, just helping a friend. Brad made his move around 11 p.m. Using a tire iron, he picked the front door lock and slipped inside. Seeing a light in the kitchen, he headed there, pulling a 9mm pistol from under his shirt. He found me sitting there drinking coffee. Hey, Art, Brad said. Willa and Tammy say hi. I'm here to find out where Jody is so I can visit her. Sorry, but I'd never tell my lawyer's eliminator or the man who burned his office, I replied. Before you eliminate me because we both know you will, how much were you promised from the insurance settlement? What makes you think I did it? He asked, taking the bait. Because you seem like someone they could manipulate into doing their dirty work. So how much of the $4 million on the accidental pass-away policy did they promise you? $4 million. They told me it was only $750,000, he said. I laughed and said, did you know Seth is actually the son of Tammy's first husband? His face turned white. George and I have been manipulated and used by both twins for years. My attorney working on my divorce sued George and Tammy for everything they had. Brad's face went white. That's why I knew Willa suing me for desertion and back child support was a scam, I said. The divorce was finalized and just needed her signature. She manipulated me into coming back. That's when I put it all together. You're just another pawn they played. So ask yourself, what are their plans for you? My divorce only delayed their plan to eliminate me. You eliminating my lawyer put their original plan back in motion. You have a chance to set them back for years knowing them as we do. What does your gut tell you? It's hard to watch a fool realize he's expendable once he's no longer needed. I'm screwed either way, Brad said. The fact that your lawyer lost control of his car and hit a tree at 70 miles an hour is manslaughter. Manslaughter would get me life. You could get 5 to 10 for manslaughter, but liquidation is life. When I'm dead, they can claim you acted out of rage over Jody and didn't know what you were doing. Did they set you up to be a scapegoat? Most accidental pass-away policies don't cover liquidation. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Asked Brad. You'd make a deal, turn in state's evidence, and hope your cooperation is taken into account. That way you'd get revenge on those planning to take you out, I said. Brad put the weapon on the table and said, call the police. I said, Brad, turn around. They're standing right behind you. Connie watched her husband on the phone, wondering what was wrong. Peter had told her that her father was at Josie's. A late call on his cell phone woke them both up. While he was talking, she put the kettle on to make hot chocolate for them. When Peter hung up the phone, he was smiling. Your father surprised us all tonight. He talked Brad out of it and basically forced him to confess everything. The undercover cops videotaped the whole thing. Connie froze with surprise. How did my father do that? He told Brad some facts he didn't know, like the truth about Seth's origins, Peter said. I think your father convinced Brad that the insurance policy wouldn't pay out for liquidation. That was the deciding factor. Even I don't know if that's true, but it created enough doubt for Brad to accept the consequences of a lesser offense instead of life without parole. Aunt Josie always said your dad was a quick thinker, but this was unexpected. What does this mean for my mom and sister? Asked Connie. If Brad agrees to testify against them in court, they'll both be charged with arson, manslaughter, and at least attempted liquidation of your father, said Peter. Connie picked up her cell phone and called Jody to let her know. They made a plan. Josie would watch the kids for a few days because Jody was going to the airport. Connie would meet her when she got a text with her arrival time. After finishing the call, she explained everything to her sister. By then, Peter had dressed and was heading to the station to get Brad's signed statement before the night ended. I didn't wake up until 8 in the morning. The first thing I did was call Jack to get the front door fixed. He said he knew someone, and within half an hour they were there. The door was replaced, new trim and lock installed. The gentleman was just finishing when my daughter Connie drove up with Jody. Jody jumped out of the car and ran to me, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, I realized how much she had been through. Brad was taken into custody last night, I said. He surrendered to the police protecting me. I was never in any real danger. If that was the case, why didn't you call me? Jody said. Why did I have to hear about it from Connie? It was almost 2 in the morning when the police cleared out, I answered honestly. I figured I'd call you today. I put my arm around my wife and pulled her close. I promise I will never put myself in that kind of danger again. As soon as the repairman finished, we locked the car, put her luggage away, and went to my brother's restaurant to eat. There, we were met by Karen, Sasha, and my parents. Jack's staff had to move 2 tables so we could all sit together. Jody was warmly greeted by everyone. Our breakfast, when it arrived, was excellent. Jack was so excited about what had happened that we ate it all. My parents were thrilled to learn that Jody and I had 2 sons named Carson and Hunter, after both my grandfathers. They looked through all the pictures of our children and us that Jody had saved on her cell phone. My daughters opened up and told them about discovering me with Josie. We were still there when Peter joined us. I noticed he looked tired. Willa and Tammy are in custody now, Peter said. Brad has confessed to everything, including his initial plan to eliminate his father. He'll be charged with arson and manslaughter when he testifies in the witch trials. Tammy and Willa face 3 counts of grand larceny, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit liquidation, and fraud. The district attorney is meeting with the divorce judge who handled your father's case to expedite the finalization of your divorce. Peter, are you saying that Art and I can finally get married? Asked Jody, trying to process what she had heard. The DA took the papers to the judge, Peter explained, along with Dad's original divorce papers. He hopes the judge, being fully informed, will waive Willa's signature requirement, the waiting period, and issue the divorce certificate. Jody, I said, I think I'd better buy you a proper engagement ring today, and finally propose. Everyone murmured at my remark. Tears welled up in Jody's eyes. She had always believed we would do it, but this was something she hadn't expected. Before we left, Mom and Dad made us promise to come over for dinner. Jody and I busied ourselves packing until about 5:30. Then we headed to my parents' house for dinner. Mom and Dad had a lot of questions. Jody shared how I had saved her from a failed marriage, thanks to her grandmother. Then she talked about getting her first job and where it led. We were still enjoying their company when Peter and Connie arrived with my divorce certificate. It was good to know that I was now free. When Jody had a chance to talk, she bragged about our children and our life together. My mom said, "We should have a wedding before you both get back." That's when my father got Peter's attention, grabbing a glass of fresh beer each. We followed him to the den because we couldn't get a word in edgewise. When word got out that Tammy had been arrested, people started calling with more information. Half of the DA's staff had to help us. Turns out what we knew was just scratching the surface of what Tammy and Willa were up to. Now it looks like the mayor will go down with them. And what's going to happen to Willa's common-law husband? I asked out of curiosity. How involved was he in all of this? He'll probably be disbarred, but he'll be involved in raising their children. Nothing we've found links him to the witches, Peter said. Has anyone notified Aunt Josie? Connie asked. Jody's dad wears a size 6.5 ring, in case you were wondering. A few minutes later, Peter and I were on our way to the mall, where he bought Connie a set of Knowing Jody's Taste, and I bought a 3-ring engagement set. When we returned, we were pleased to find that they didn't know we had left. I was on the phone with Josie when Karen and her boyfriend showed up. The house was full, and we all moved into the living room. The men had to bring chairs from the kitchen. Dad told Jody to sit in his chair. This let my mom know something was up, so she watched the scene with eagle eyes. There was silence in the room as I walked over and knelt down to ask my common-law spouse to legally become my wife. I caught her off guard, of course. She said yes. The party went on. My father proudly said, "I need to catch up on almost 7 years of drinking with my son and Jody. And Art, your engagement is the best way to start." Peter had to drive Jody and me back to Josie's. A lot of stress and worry were relieved. Friday, we went to City Hall to pick up our license. Jody found out she could fit into Connie's wedding dress. Jack agreed to be my best man. Karen became Jody's maid of honor. The DA agreed to perform the ceremony. I had to buy a suit at Macy's. There was no way my future wife was going to let me marry her in blue jeans. On Sunday afternoon, in my parents' backyard, with the entire family present, we said our vows to everyone's admiration. Even the twins' father was there. We told everyone we didn't want any gifts, but my former father-in-law handed me an envelope. "Colin, this is not a wedding gift. It's your early inheritance," he said with a smile. "The rest of my estate will go to your daughters." I slipped the envelope into my suit and forgot about it for the rest of the day. Everyone videotaped the ceremony and texted it to Aunt Josie. Someone asked where we were going on our honeymoon. Jody's response was, "After everything we've been through, once Grandma gets settled in the new house, our honeymoon will be a week in Florida and a week in California, enjoying Disney with the kids. Because without family, we wouldn't be where we are today." Before we headed home the next day, I handed Jody an envelope. Inside was a bank promissory note for $100,000 with a note. It read, "Thank you for helping to fix karma. I always thought the twins liquidated their mother. I will enjoy watching them get the reward they deserve for their deeds, and so will my granddaughters." Jody put the envelope in her purse without saying anything to anyone. After hugging my daughters and parents, Jody and I climbed into the U-Haul. We drove home, finally free of the past.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Life has a strange way of surprising you. For years, my world revolved around my late wife, Susan, and our quiet life together. When she passed away 3 years ago after her painful battle with breast cancer, it felt as though the ground beneath me had disappeared. I buried myself in work as a biochemical engineer, dealing with toxic chemicals that most people wouldn't dare to go near. It paid well, sure, but it was lonely work, just like my life had become. My dog, Kevin, a goofy Labrador retriever, was the only one keeping me company, wagging his tail and reminding me there was still something to care for. Then came Malina. Meeting her felt like breathing fresh air after being trapped in a room full of fumes. She's 42, a little younger than me, but mature, warm, and grounded. A single mother to Ella, her 18-year-old daughter, Malina seemed like the kind of woman I could build something meaningful with. I hadn't thought about dating after Susan, but there was something about Malina that made me feel alive again. Ella, though, that's been a challenge. She's stunning, no doubt about that, but her beauty has spoiled her. She carries herself with an arrogance that's hard to ignore, acting as though the world owes her something. I've tried to connect with her, but every attempt has been met with eye rolls, snarky comments, or outright dismissal. I can tell she doesn't approve of me, and honestly, it stings. I'm just a man trying to make a place for myself in her life because I care about her mother. It doesn't help that Malina's mother, Vivian, seems to share Ella's disdain. From the moment we met, she made it clear she didn't think much of me or my work. She outright told Malina that I wasn't good enough for her. Vivian thinks I don't have a real job, whatever that means, even though my salary could pay for her retirement and then some. I guess she prefers someone in a flashy suit with a title she could brag about. But I'm not here to impress her. I'm here because I love her daughter. For now, I take things one day at a time. Loving Malina means accepting the baggage that comes with her life, even if it's complicated. I've weathered storms before, and I'm not going to let Vivian's judgments or Ella's attitude scare me away. This feels worth fighting for. When Malina and Ella moved in, I knew it wasn't going to be smooth sailing. What I didn't anticipate was just how much friction Kevin, my dog, would create. Kevin is a part of my life, plain and simple. He's loyal, easygoing, and the only living thing in this house that doesn't talk back. Unfortunately, Ella and Vivian don't share my opinion. Ella seems to go out of her way to antagonize the poor dog. She complains constantly about his smell, the hair he sheds, and the way he thumps his tail against the furniture. I've caught her deliberately leaving doors open, probably hoping Kevin would wander off and solve the problem for her. Of course, Kevin is smarter than she gives him credit for. He sticks close to me, even when she's trying to shoo him away with a broom. Vivian, though, has taken it a step further. She made it clear the dog is a deal-breaker. If the dog stays, there's no wedding, she announced one night, sipping her tea like she was handing down a royal decree. I just nodded, not giving her the satisfaction of a reaction. I don't take ultimatums lightly, especially not from someone who spends most of her time criticizing everything about me. Malina, to her credit, tries to keep the peace. She doesn't share their dislike for Kevin, but she's cautious about siding with me too openly. I get it. She's balancing a lot. But there's a limit to how much I'm willing to compromise. My home is Kevin's home, and that's not up for negotiation. Ella's attitude hasn't improved since they moved in. If anything, living under the same roof has made her more vocal about her disdain for both me and the dog. I overheard her on the phone with a friend the other day, complaining about how gross it is to live in a house with a dog. I chose to let it slide, but it's becoming clear that we're going to have a conversation sooner or later. Vivian, thankfully, doesn't live with us, but her presence looms large. She visits often and always manages to slip in a comment about how inappropriate it is for someone like me to have a pet when I'm trying to blend families. She even suggested I consider rehoming Kevin for Ella's sake, as if the dog is some disposable piece of furniture. I've been polite so far, but my patience is wearing thin. This is my house. I invited Malina and Ella in because I saw a future with them, but that doesn't mean I'm going to start dismantling my life to cater to their whims. Kevin has been with me through thick and thin, and I'm not about to send him packing because a teenager doesn't like the way he smells. If Vivian thinks she can dictate terms for my life, she's got another thing coming. And as for Ella, she's 15. She's entitled to her opinions, but this isn't a democracy. At some point, she's going to have to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her preferences. For now, I'm holding my ground. Kevin stays, no matter how much barking there is, on both sides. Every family has its quirks, but Malina's family is in a league of its own. Vivian, her mother, seems to have a unique talent for making bad decisions and then doubling down on them. Take her favorite son-in-law, Tony, for example. A former, or perhaps current, drug dealer who spends more time in and out of jail than he does with his wife, Nancy. Yet somehow, he's the golden boy. Vivian sings Tony's praises every chance she gets. He knows how to provide, she says, usually with an air of smugness, as though a knack for dodging law enforcement is an admirable skill. Apparently, the fact that he brings in the dough is enough for Vivian to overlook the small detail that most of his earnings aren't exactly coming from legitimate means. Tony and I couldn't be more different. While I've spent my life working in a respectable, stable job, dealing with dangerous chemicals in controlled environments, Tony's been living on the edge, dabbling in activities that could land him behind bars for good. Yet somehow, in Vivian's eyes, I'm the one who doesn't measure up. It's comical, really. I've built a career that pays well, provides a comfortable home, and leaves me with enough time and energy to care for the people I love, and my dog, Kevin. But none of that seems to matter to Vivian. Tony, with his shady dealings and criminal record, is her ideal son-in-law because he's a man who takes risks and gets results. The irony isn't lost on me. Vivian looks down on my work, calling it just a job, while holding up Tony as an example of success, even though his lifestyle could land Nancy in trouble by association. It's not that I wish ill on Tony, I don't, but it's hard to take Vivian seriously when her standards for success are so blatantly skewed. Nancy, for her part, seems content with the arrangement. Whether that's out of love for Tony or convenience, I can't say. She's friendly enough, but I steer clear of getting too involved. Their dynamic is their business, and I've got enough on my plate without trying to untangle their mess. Still, I can't help but wonder how Vivian rationalizes her blatant favoritism. It's clear she measures worth by the wrong metrics: money, appearances, and a willingness to bend the rules. If that's the standard she's judging me by, then I'll never win her approval, and honestly, I'm fine with that. Living with Ella has been a test of patience, but the real challenge isn't just her, it's Vivian. That woman has done more to reinforce Ella's snobbish attitude than any teenager needs. Vivian pampers Ella's worst behavior, treating her arrogance like a badge of honor. It's exhausting. The breaking point came when I found out Ella had bullied a girl at school. A few parents got involved, and the details made my blood boil. Ella had humiliated the girl in front of their classmates over something trivial: her clothes, of all things. It wasn't just mean, it was cruel. When the school contacted us, I thought this would be a moment of reckoning for Ella, a chance for her to face some consequences. Instead, Vivian swooped in like a defense lawyer at a high-profile trial. Ella is just expressing herself, she said, brushing it off as though bullying is some natural rite of passage. That other girl needs to toughen up. That was it for me. I sat Malina down and made it clear. This behavior was unacceptable, and it wouldn't be tolerated in my house. Ella wasn't going to grow up thinking she could mistreat people without consequences, not under my roof. At first, Malina was defensive, as I expected she'd be. She's a mother, after all, and it's natural to want to protect your child, even when they're in the wrong. But I was firm. Ella has to apologize, I told her. And Vivian needs to stay out of this. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a boundary. The argument that followed wasn't pleasant, but it needed to happen. I reminded Malina that while I cared deeply for her and was committed to making this family work, I wouldn't stand by and let this kind of behavior continue. This is about setting a standard, I said. If Ella thinks this is okay now, what's next? Where does it stop? Eventually, Malina saw my point. She agreed to talk to Ella, though I could tell she wasn't thrilled about it. As for Vivian, I made sure she understood that her interference wasn't welcome. I told her flat out that backing Ella's bad behavior was doing more harm than good, and that if she couldn't see that, she needed to stay out of it. She didn't take it well, of course. Vivian rarely does when someone challenges her. But for once, she backed down, though not without some dramatic eye-rolling and muttering about how I was too strict. Ella, to her credit, did apologize. It wasn't the most heartfelt apology I've ever heard, but it was a start. More importantly, she saw that there were lines she couldn't cross in this house without consequences. That moment set a precedent. This is my home, and I won't let it become a breeding ground for entitlement or cruelty, no matter how much Vivian tries to coddle Ella. If I'm going to be a part of this family, there have to be rules, and those rules apply to everyone, including Ella and Vivian. I wasn't expecting to come home early that day. I thought I'd just relax, maybe catch up on some work emails, and enjoy a quiet evening with Kevin. Instead, I stumbled into a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, a conversation that flipped my world upside down. I was in the kitchen when I heard voices. Malina and Vivian were talking in the living room. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Vivian's visits had become less frequent over the past year, but whenever she came around, the two of them liked to chat and sip tea like old times. I figured this was more of the same. Then, a sentence caught my ear, sharp and clear. "Come on, Mom. I have waited for a year. He provides good." Let me marry him first, then I will get rid of him. I froze. Did I hear that right? I leaned against the counter, gripping it for balance as her words sank in. Then at least I can get this house and his money, she continued, her tone casual, like she was planning a weekend getaway and not discussing how to dismantle my life. Then I might also move you in here. Vivian's reply was muffled, but I didn't need to hear her words. It was clear she wasn't objecting. Then came the cherry on top. No, I am not having sex with Tony now. That was last week. My stomach churned. Tony. Of course, it had to be Tony, the golden boy. Suddenly, all those late nights and girl trips Malina took made sense. I stood there, stunned, as the realization washed over me. The past year had been a carefully constructed lie. I stayed silent, listening for a few more minutes, but I couldn't bear to hear any more. My mind raced, piecing together every suspicious moment, every odd interaction. It all fit. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a scheme, and I was the mark. I didn't confront them then. I didn't storm into the living room and demand answers. No, I walked out the back door, needing space to think. The betrayal cut deep, but I wasn't going to let emotion cloud my judgment. I had worked too hard for everything I had. For this house, my career, my peace of mind. I wasn't going to let Malina and her toxic family take it from me. One thing was clear. This was over. I didn't care how much time I had invested, how much I thought I cared for her. She and her manipulative games had no place in my life. I sat in the backyard with Kevin for a while, running through my options, legal protections, cutting ties, and making sure I came out of this mess unscathed. I had the resources, and now I had the motivation. That night, I acted like nothing had happened. I needed time to plan my next move, to make sure I wasn't blindsided by any counterattack. But as far as I'm concerned, Malina, Ella, and Vivian have overstayed their welcome. This is my home, my life, and my future, and I'll be damned if I let them take it from me. Sometimes, revenge isn't about anger. It's about precision. After overhearing Malina's betrayal, I decided I wouldn't yell or fight. I'd solve the problem permanently. They wanted me gone? Fine. I'd just send them somewhere far enough that they wouldn't be my problem anymore. I started with Vivian. Vivian, I said over the phone, my voice as warm as I could muster. I've been thinking a lot about how things have been between us. I want to make things right. She hesitated. What do you mean, Richard? Well, I continued, you've never really liked me, and I get that. But I want us to bond, and I thought a family trip might be the perfect way to start fresh. I've planned something special, an African safari. A safari? Her tone softened immediately, excitement creeping in. Where? Somalia, I said with confidence. It's off the beaten path, exclusive, untouched by mass tourism. It's the real Africa, Vivian. You'll love it. There was a pause, then a laugh. You know what, Richard? That sounds nice. I'll talk to Malina. Convincing Ella was even easier. She barely listened, too busy scrolling on her phone. Ella, we're going to Africa. You'll have a chance to post some amazing pictures for your social media. She shrugged. Whatever. As long as I get to shop. Finally, I broached the idea with Malina. I know you've been under a lot of stress, and I thought a trip would be a great way to unwind, I said, holding her hand like the perfect boyfriend. She gave me a cautious smile. You're really trying, Richard. That's sweet. Oh, and I think Tony and Nancy should come, too. It's a family thing, after all. Her eyes lit up at the mention of Tony. She tried to hide it, but I caught it. Really? You're okay with that? Of course, I said smoothly. This trip is about making things right. The day of the flight arrived, and everything went according to plan. We flew into Somaliland, and I kept the enthusiasm high. This place is incredible, I told them as we disembarked. We'll take a cab to the hotel, and from there, we'll arrange our safari tours. The confusion started when I mentioned the need for 2 cabs. Why can't we all go together? Vivian asked, her suspicion flaring. Simple logistics, I replied with a smile. 6 people and luggage. It's too much for 1 car. I'll follow behind and meet you at the hotel. They bought it, of course. I flagged down a cab for them and handed the driver a piece of paper with the hotel name I'd made up, written alongside Mogadishu City Center. As they piled into the cab, Ella groaned. This place is so dusty. Are there even malls here? You'll love it, I assured her. It's authentic. Malina gave me a skeptical look. You're sure this place is safe, right? Safe? It's paradise. I lied effortlessly. Now, you all go ahead, and I'll be right behind you. As the cab pulled away, I watched them go, a mixture of satisfaction and relief washing over me. I turned to the cab driver who would take me to my actual destination. Change of plans, I told him. Take me back to the airport. Flying back home after my little safari detour felt like shedding a heavy, toxic coat. The house was finally quiet. No more snobbish comments from Ella, no more manipulative schemes from Malina, and certainly no judgmental stares from Vivian. Just me and Kevin, living the way we always should have. First, I took care of the legalities. I contacted my lawyer and filed a restraining order against all three of them, Malina, Ella, and Vivian. I wanted to make sure that none of them could come near me or my home again. Then, I packed up all their things, threw them into a few old boxes, and drove straight to Vivian's house. As I dumped the boxes on her porch, I smiled to myself. Vivian, still stuck in Somalia, wouldn't be able to help her precious daughter and granddaughter anytime soon. A week passed, and just as I was settling back into my peaceful life, chaos came knocking, literally. It was a Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee and watching Kevin chase a squirrel in the yard when the doorbell rang. The moment I opened the door, I saw Malina charging at me like a bull. Her face was red with rage. "You think you can just get rid of me like that?" she screamed, pounding on the door. "Malina," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You need to leave. I don't want to call the cops, but I will." "Call them," she spat, slamming her fists against the door. "You can't treat me like this. I gave you a year of my life." "A year of lies," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "You made your intentions clear, Malina. You're not welcome here anymore." By now, Ella had joined in, yelling something incoherent and banging on the windows. Kevin, my loyal companion, barked ferociously from inside, clearly ready to defend his home. "Get your crazy selves off my property," I warned. When they didn't stop, I stepped back and dialed 911. "Hello? I need officers at my address immediately. I have 2 people trespassing and trying to break into my house." The cops arrived within minutes. 2 squad cars pulled up, lights flashing, and officers quickly assessed the situation. "She won't let us in," Malina wailed dramatically as an officer approached her. "Ma'am, step back from the property," the officer commanded. "I just want to talk to him," she insisted, but her aggressive stance made it clear she wasn't here for a polite conversation. "I have a restraining order against both of them," I informed the officers, handing over the paperwork. That was the nail in the coffin. The officers didn't hesitate to cuff both of them. "You're making a mistake, Richard," Malina yelled as she was escorted to the squad car. "You'll regret this." "No, Malina," I replied coolly. "The only thing I regret is not seeing through you sooner." Ella was less dramatic, but just as furious, glaring at me as they loaded her into the car. Once they were gone, the peace in my home felt even sweeter. Kevin wagged his tail happily as I scratched behind his ears. "Well, buddy," I said, "I think we've finally gotten rid of them for good." Kevin barked in agreement, clearly enjoying the quiet as much as I was. As for Vivian, last I heard, she was still in Somalia, scrambling to find a way home. I wasn't losing sleep over it. Justice had been served, and for the first time in a long time, my house and my life was truly my own. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.